evening, everybody. I do not rank a gavel, so I'm banging my water bottle. We are convening at 7 p.m. The people and aldermen in the gallery could just take their seats or leave. This is a meeting of the Human Affairs Committee. It's April 21st in the Aldermanic Chamber. It is 7 p.m. Would you like to call the roll?
Sure. Alderman Thibodeau? Here. Alderman Senate is here. Alderwoman at Large Timmons? Alderwoman at Large Kelly?
Here.
And Alderman Tom Lopez.
I am here.
We have 4 in attendance. Also joining us this evening are Alderman Tebow, Alderman Dowd. I did see Alderman O'Brien, but no longer.
He is dipped out.
And Director Sullivan.
All right. So we have public comment. I will just warn the public, absolutely welcome to come and make public comment, but this is the Human Affairs Committee. We have one agenda item, which is relative to the amendment of the scope of services of the Public Health Infrastructure Grant. So anyone wishing to make public comment, please approach. Not all at once. It looks like nobody will. Next, we have discussion presentation.
There are none.
Communications.
Communication has been received from Matt Sullivan, Community Development Director, regarding urban programs department updates, April 2025.
All right, without objection, we will accept and place that on file. I would definitely recommend committee members read that, and it appears Alderman Sullivan will present on it.
I don't know if I'm Alderman Sullivan this evening.
Director Sullivan.
I don't know about that.
He's not here yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may just make a few comments relative to the communication I had forwarded to you. This is actually keeping up with the tradition that former manager Long had done in front of this committee, providing a monthly update memo. So I've done what I can to capture a year of updates in one 4-page memo. Hopefully this satisfies you, but in all seriousness, I did want to provide a few updates this evening to the committee relative to projects that are ongoing, but I'll be very brief because I think many of you will have a long evening. The 2 critical items within here that I wanted to quickly comment on are the FY 2026 action plan. As you're all familiar, the Human Affairs Committee plays a critical role in identifying the projects that are funded, particularly for Community Development Block Grant or CDBG monies. I guess I'll get out of the way quickly that we do anticipate to receive an allocation of CDBG funds this year from HUD. All signs through the continuing resolution point to us receiving those monies in the normal course, so that's the first positive news. The second piece of positive news relative to the Community Development Block Grant Program is that we've received 12 applications as of last Friday. So we're preparing now to come forward to you as part of your customary process, have those agencies that submitted for CDBG do a presentation to you. We'll do a scoring or recommendation meeting as a group. You remember we put the spreadsheet up and we go through and we score all of the projects. And then ultimately those recommendations move forward back to the full board as part of a piece of legislation that you will actually hear for first reading tomorrow evening at the Board of Aldermen meeting. But I just wanted to make you all aware that that process is underway. Perhaps most critically is that we're always up against a timing issue every year. Often that timing issue is that HUD has not released our annual allocation, so we're obviously taking a stab at what the money is that we're going to receive. This year the timing issue is twofold. One, we have not received our allocation from HUD, so we're taking a guess at what the allocation might be. But second, we're still up against a time crunch to get this all done by the end of June. We have about 2.5 months to adopt our action plan while still waiting for HUD to tell us what our number is. And so I spoke to Alderman Lopez earlier this evening. I'm going to be working with he and Donna Graham to try and identify a special meeting date in May, perhaps 2 special meeting dates. I know you're very busy, particularly those that are on Budget Review Committee. So we may need to piggyback some meetings or find some alternative strategies, which could even mean, and I hesitate to say this, but perhaps a Friday meeting or Friday morning meeting, but more to come on that front. I see shaking heads, but we're going to do whatever we can to get something scheduled because this is a critical process. What's really critical for us is that we have a 30-day gap between your meeting on June 24th and when the recommendations are made by this committee. And so we're going to work to get that scheduled together, but please do pay attention to your email addresses over the coming week, particularly as we try to get some special meetings put in place. So I appreciate your consideration of that. And then just a few other quick updates. It is National Community Development Week across the country. We're celebrating 50 years of the Community Development Block Grant, which is exciting. Thanks for that round of applause, Alderman Tebow. Love that. But I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge all the great work that the Community Development Block Grant and Home Funds have done here in the city of Nashua, creating hundreds of housing units, doing a multitude of public facilities projects and public services projects. And as you all know, the agencies that we fund depend upon those funds on an annual basis. So we're really proud of the work that's been done and hope that there are many years of limited disruption to that funding as well. So we're happy to continue that work. And then finally, I just wanted to comment on a two-piece item, and that is one that the Housing Revolving Fund, as you've heard, has gone through the process over the last year and a half of releasing a notice of funding availability and identifying projects that actually can receive Housing Revolving Fund monies. We've identified some projects, as Alderwoman Kelly knows well, two in particular, one being funding the Front Door Agency at $350,000 for a landlord incentive program. The second project being funding Southern New Hampshire Hospital, about $60,000 to actually undertake planning and design work associated with a workforce housing project that they intend to build on their campus. And so projects are very different, which I think is a great testament to the diversity of implementation uses of the funds in the Housing Revolving Fund. What we're really excited about, I think, is the idea of potentially funding a development project and putting monies into the actual creation of affordable housing. I have a good sense that we're going to do that over the next year, but we're really excited about the work that has been done. Where I'm going here is actually that the city of Nashua was designated as a state of New Hampshire housing champion about 3 months ago through the governor's office and the Bureau of Economic Affairs. At the time, it was a nice little pat on the backs for some of the work that we've been doing to date around our zoning and other housing work, and we weren't really sure what that designation meant. Shortly thereafter, the state of New Hampshire rolled out a funding program for municipalities to apply for grants, the basis being whether they had created affordable housing over the last calendar year. So if you had created affordable housing, particularly affordable housing to those making 60% of the area median income or lower, you basically consolidated all of those units into an application, you applied to the state for money, and you really weren't sure what money you were going to get. You were basically saying, we created this affordable housing, give us some funding to do more housing work. We didn't hear anything for several months, and then last week on Wednesday, we received notification from the Bureau of Economic Affairs that we were receiving $828,000 in grant monies for our affordable housing work over the last year. And when I say our, I mean all of you, of course, and then particularly the National Housing Redevelopment Authority, who we took a lot of, we were able to use their units as credit within the application. So why do I bring this all up? We received $828,000. We were told we have a week to accept the funds at the aldermanic level, which we always love that time crunch. So tomorrow evening, you're going to see a piece of legislation to accept that money and put it into the Housing Revolving Fund, the place where I think those monies are best directed personally. I leave it to you for your own judgment to agree with me or not. But I have talked to Alderman Lopez about the idea of a first and second reading tomorrow evening. And I don't want to represent his position, but I think he's generally supportive. But I wanted to take an opportunity tonight to quickly tell you about this grant program, answer any questions that you might have, because I'm very appreciative of the fact that you forgive your ability to debate and hear the legislation when a first and second reading happens. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about that grant program, the action you'll be undertaking tomorrow evening. Happy to answer questions tomorrow as well, but I just really wanted to communicate that success story to all of you and answer any questions that arise.
Okay, so a point of clarification.
Sure.
Was that last item in the communication that you sent?
The last item was not in the communication I sent Alderman
Then I
Lopez.
just want to frame this for the committee.
Sure.
Because this was kind of smuggled in under the approval of the communication. We're going to discuss this as a discussion item. I would probably, without objection, have us do that discussion now, because there's a lot to discuss, and Director Bagley isn't here to present on her item yet anyway. So if it is okay with the committee, then I would like to allow Director Sullivan to present on what he's doing and us to have that discussion now. Does that work?
I'm happy to do that. I do know we do have a representative from Public Health here this evening, though, so
Okay.
I just want to make clear that they are ready to go. But yeah, I'd be happy to have a discussion about this evening, about the grant itself, the destination being the Housing Revolving Fund. If there are questions about what the intent of those monies would be, my short answer would be it's the purposes that are already defined for the Housing Revolving Fund. There are a few sort of unique projects that I think I have in mind that are emerging over the coming year. And I don't want to commit strictly to anything, but funding going into the Housing Revolving Fund is obviously subject to a recommendation of the Housing Revolving Fund Committee, and then the agent to expend is the mayor. So I'll stop there, Alderman Lopez, and maybe hear some discussion. I'm happy to answer questions that might come up.
Just one point of order or business that I want to get done, and I see Alderman Kelly will get her next. Can I see a show of hands for people who would be willing to meet on a Friday evening if necessary? The Budget Committee is already got one up. The Budget Committee is already filling up a lot of them. I know some committee members
Hard
may
to
have
know.
family member commitments, but it was something that I spun as an idea because when it comes down to ranking the nonprofits that apply, we get the presentations and then the ranking, and originally it was asked, can we do both in one night? And I was like, oh, that's 12 presentations and then trying to make a decision on them. I don't want to put pressure on committee members to try to make a snap decision. So that's why I thought a second day would be better, but there's a very limited number of options, particularly because some of the members on this committee are on finance or joint special. Can we do
Alderman
one
Lopez?
more quick sense of the body from committee members?
Just a quick thing, it has nothing to do with that. It's, Lisa Photo is volunteered her facility, it has camera capability, to have meetings over there if City Hall gets jammed up. So a meeting can be held at DPW headquarters.
If I may just quickly comment on that, Alderman Lopez, because I think that's a,
Before we get too off track, I'm fully aware there's
Sure.
other buildings and rooms we can use.
Right.
I just want to get the sense of the body first about whether we can do Fridays. I saw Alderman Thibodeau. Is there a concern on?
I cannot do Friday nights.
Okay.
It would be a challenge for me.
Okay,
personally, you know.
so we will
Such a
try
nice way
not
to
to do that, but we will be mindful of our barriers. Because particularly the decision-making about the HUD CDBG is important to all the committee members. So I want to see if we can figure out how to get everybody there. If you want to respond to Alderman Dowd, but then Alderman Kelly was waiting.
Alderman Lopez, it was actually going to be exactly what you just said, and that is that it's actually not finding space that's the issue. It's that many evenings, the conflict is that members of this committee are on other committees that are meeting. And whether it's one or two members, it puts us dangerously close to not being able to achieve quorum. So we actually do have space, thanks to many others, but it's the bodies that we struggle to get sometimes. So that's all I wanted to add, Alderman Lopez.
Thank you. Alderman Kelly, thank you for being patient.
All right, and we can work on this behind the scenes. I think during the day would be easier. And for me in particular, I don't know how everyone else
Okay.
feels.
I will ask I'll ask Legislative Assistant Graham if she can send us a doodle poll and give us all those options so we can rank them.
That would
Can
be
we
great.
doodle? I have an actual question for Alderman Sullivan. Are we there yet? Do you want me to hold?
Let's move on.
Again? I'm sorry.
Director Sullivan.
Been elected.
Alderman Kelly, if you'd like to ask your question.
Did you have something germane to this conversation before?
Yeah, I mean, what about just earlier, like 6 o'clock? I mean, so most meetings are 7 or 7:30. Can people do 6, 5:30? Like, so it's outside of the work hours, but still enough time to do some of it before the next meeting starts, especially on a Tuesday when the meeting doesn't start till 7:30.
Yes, most likely we can do it. We can look at different times and different days. Doodle is a program that basically offers multiple choices and times and lets somebody pick their availability, and then the overlapping votes basically gets highlighted. So it's a way of kind of clearing through without going through every single permutation.
Cool.
Alderman Kelly?
Can I now speak to the
Yes,
Alderman.
please.
First, I wanted to congratulate you and your team and the city for getting this money. It's really lovely to hear that we're being recognized for the work that we're doing. So I like the idea of putting it into the revolving fund. I know how hard we've worked on the rubric and how that money can be used. My question is just about, sometimes we get these grants and there's strings attached. What does this one look like?
I can't believe I'm going to say this. There are no strings. And let's reserve our excitement for a second. We've actually gotten several of these grants, though, over time. And you may remember we received a similar grant for the 249 Main Street project that was a result of the creation of affordable housing, but the monies could have been used to, I'm going to use an example, I'm not suggesting this, but buy a vehicle from the SURF. You could literally use it for that. I think it's been this committee's and the board's general philosophy, and I'll tell you it's my philosophy, that we put the money, we reinvest the money back into from whence it came, right? But there are really no strings attached to this. There's not required to be used for housing. It's not required to be expended in a given period of time. The only requirement, in fact, is that we accept the money very quickly because of the state fiscal year and everything going on there. So it's really limited in the level of oversight and administration.
Great.
Hence dangerous, because as we were talking about it, I was already like, well, could we hypothetically use this to implement like an emergency shelter, as has been discussed by public health? And then tonight we find out there's portable classrooms available. That makes my mouth water, but I'm sure there's other people with other ideas too. So I think part of the effort for tomorrow is to get it into a specific use before it gets gobbled up by everybody trying to do everything with it.
That's right.
So there will be a second reading I will make a motion for a second reading tomorrow. The full board has to approve that and say, yep, okay, let's move quickly with this. But part of the reason why Director Sullivan was presenting was so that I can give an oral report to allow for that to happen instead of it just coming in out of nowhere.
Yeah, and thank you for allowing me to do that. I really know that it's frustrating to get these grant requests that come in so quickly, and the state needs us to act so quickly. I know public health deals with this as well, but I appreciate the committee's flexibility.
I do not mind oh, look, we're going to give you a whole bunch of unstructured fund last minute ones. I just don't like we have to move very, very quickly and possibly meet on Fridays, Saturdays,
Yeah.
or whatever in order to do the HUD funding. And then HUD's like, oh, we're changing a definition, so stand by for another 3 months.
Yep, understood.
Because one thing that I would clarify for the committee is tomorrow's agenda has both the 2025 HUD one, which is, we approved last year, but then modifications were being made, changes were being made, and the incoming 2026 one. So
Correct.
just look at the dates so we don't get them confused, I guess.
That's correct.
Any further committee comments? Alderman Thibodeau?
Yes, the ultimate source of these wonderful funds.
The source, Alderman Tulu, that's a good question. Let me confirm before tomorrow night's meeting, but these monies are state budget monies. I am nearly 100% certain. Let me confirm that. Let me send you an email. I'll send the committee an email prior to tomorrow night's meeting, just so you have a solid answer from me. But I am nearly certain that these were included in the BEA budget, that they're not ARPA dollars or anything else from that system. So let me confirm that and get back to you before tomorrow night's meeting. Thank you.
It might be better to send it to the full board.
Yeah, that's wise. I'll do that.
At that point, yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for the discussion.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I don't know that we fully, formally approved the communication, so I guess I'm just going to ask for a quick vote.
Well, you said without
You said you
objection.
accept it without any objection.
Okay,
You did.
and everybody feels like they had their chance to object? All right. The only one who came up was to present, so. All right, then, without objection, we accepted that. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
We have R25-142, relative to the amendment of the scope of services of the Public Health Infrastructure Grant. I'll make a motion to recommend final passage.
All right, and we have someone from Public Health to present. Sorry for not recognizing you earlier, I'm still blind. You want to come up to the front here, introduce your name?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Iraida Munoz, and I am the Public Health Strategist for the Division of Public Health and Community Services. And I am here to speak on Resolution R25-142 for the purpose of the amendment of the scope of services for the Public Health Infrastructure Grant. I would like to ask the Human Affairs Committee to approve the passage of this resolution to support the Public Health Infrastructure Grant, which is pass-through funding from the CDC to New Hampshire DHHS for workforce capacity and training in the amount of $220,000 for 2 years. That is $110,000 per year for the fiscal year 2025 through 2026. This funding was approved by the state initially and brought before this alderman for approval in December 2024, and it was held up after the executive order in January required all state funding to review the language in all grants. The scope of the grant was rewrite to comply with the federal requirements. This funding supports all full-time position, one full-time position. And also supports some benefits. The majority of other costs includes conferences for training, software. There's a web-based platform called My Sidewalk, which is where we upload our community health assessment and community health improvement plan information, which is required to sustain our accreditation status. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. If there's any questions you are not, I am here to answer any.
Just to clarify your earlier statement, you said that it supports all full-time or just one full-time?
One full-time position, just enough for one, yes.
Further additional questions? Is this matched through existing budget process? You said it was approved in December of
Yeah.
last year. So is this part of the 2025 budget already?
Yeah, it's already, it will be, I mean, it's already in place. If you approve it for 2025, it will end in the fiscal year 2026. It's a 2-year.
Oh, that's true, it's 2 years, okay. Alderman Kelly.
So we heard through your budget process that you were losing about half of your community health workforce. Is this save one person, or is this just a pre-budget item?
No, it doesn't support anything related to community health workers.
Someone can hope, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other further questions? All right, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, just check in with the clerk towards the end of the meeting, just to write your name so we can get it for the transcriber.
Yeah. So my name is Iraida, Iraida Munoz, Munoz. And my
Thank you so much.
position, public health strategist.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so, motion is to recommend final passage. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is recommended for final passage to the Board of Aldermen. Any new business ordinances?
There's none.
Any tabled in committees?
There's none.
General discussion? Yeah, general discussion. Does anyone want more? Public comment? Seeing no members of the public approaching, remarks by the alderman. Anyone have some remarks? All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Alderman Clee. We have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 7:22 PM.
Review Committee to order. It's April 21st, 2025. We're in the Aldermanic Chamber, and the meeting's been duly noticed in 2 places, including the city's website in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91-A:2(2). Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Tim Senate.
Here.
Alderman Derek Theobald.
Here.
Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I am here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien is present. And our chairman, Alderman Richard Dowd.
Present.
Also in attendance is Alderman Tom Lopez.
Present.
And also in attendance is Mario Andrade, Superintendent of the Nashua School District, Crystal D. Gay, Chief Operating Officer, and Ms. Jennifer Bishop, Chair of the Board of Education.
Okay, we have a quorum. Communications,
There are none.
unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions,
None.
new business ordinances,
None.
tabled in committee. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to remove from the table R-25-143, which is the fiscal year budget of 2026.
Okay, motion on the floor is to remove from the table R-25-143. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Department 191, the school department. And before we get going, I'll ask the superintendent and the chief financial officer, the Board of Ed chair and the budget chair, if they would like to come up, take seats. So just as a reminder, as we go through, we'll be asking questions of the school department after they give a slight presentation on their budget. When it comes to the wrap-up, you can give suggestions as to where you think they could save money or add money, but the bottom line is we only have single line authority, so it's only bottom line actions, cuts or adds, okay? With that, I will call on the Board of Education to give us an overview. Dr. Andrade?
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. Good evening. My name is Dr. Mario Andrade. I'm the proud superintendent of schools here in Nashua, and with me tonight is Board President Jen Bishop and our COO, Ms. DeGray. So we have a presentation tonight. I think if many of you were at the Board of Education meeting a couple weeks ago, it's very similar numbers. So unfortunately, this is not working, so is it working? Oh, there it is.
Gracefully.
Oh, okay.
We're quicker
Yeah,
than-
all right, I was like, that's pretty miraculous. So this is a quick video on just a little background of the Nashua school districts, and hopefully we have some sound.
Yeah, we might need some volume, please.
Okay.
Maybe
and-
not.
And if not, then this is on our district website. But again, I think there's always important to go back to what's our why. And at the end of the day, when we have these conversations around our department's budget, we need to go back to, again, why is it a reasonable return on the investment? It always comes back to our students and how are we supporting them in multiple facets. So again, we always look at college and career readiness and really preparing them for post-secondary transitions. So again, this is on our website. We don't have to pretend we're hearing the words. But again, I think it's really important to look at all the celebrations and recognitions and accomplishments of our students, our staff, our administration, and really how we have a incredible national community supporting our schools. So Again, I encourage you to watch the video and really talk about how do we prepare 10,000 gateways to opportunity for all of our students. So next slide, just a little background around the district numbers, if you move on to the next one. We can see over the last couple of years, so over the last 10 years, the change in our enrollment, as well as the number of FTEs. So if we go back to 2014, 2015, we had roughly 11,500 students in the district. And in the 24-25 school year, we have 9,701. Again, 10 years ago, we had about 991 full-time teacher equivalents, and today we have 969. If we move to the next slide, we can actually see here in color the change in our demographics. So, a logical question is if we had nearly 3,000 students 10 years ago and approximately the same amount of teachers, why is that happening? And so really, if you look at the 24-25 school year compared to 2014 and 2015, you really see a change in our demographics. And you see our, most significantly, a change in our ELL population. So that's the orange. And you would see that there was approximately 1,000 ELL students 10 years ago, and we have doubled that number in the last 10 years. And the ELL students just need a lot more supports depending on what level they're coming in their English language proficiency. And so there's a requirement there. Over the last couple of years, you heard us report numerous times that we have a DOJ settlement for not providing enough ELL supports to our students. So there's been a major investment over the last couple of years in ELL. And then also we've had an increase about 400 special education students. The big change is really with our regular ed students, going from about 8,500 regular ed students down to about 5,500. And that's when we get into conversations more about class size, high school offerings. That has been a major change. So if we go to the next slide, again, what I just alluded to was the changing in demographics around ELL students versus our ELL teacher supports. So again, if we look back in 2014, we had a roughly 1,100, this is the orange line, about 1,100 ELL students. But look at the amount of ELL teachers we had. It was just over 20 teachers for ELL supporting about 1,000 ELL students. And if we look at our change in now, is that the district has made a significant increase in supporting our ELL population. So we have, again, just under 2,100 ELL students. And we've, since 21-22, there's a sharp increase in the amount of ELL teachers that we've hired. In full transparency, we're not there yet. We know we still need more ELL teachers. And if we go to the next slide, it's a little clearer on there, on the student ratio. Again, if we look at the ratios back in 2008, 2009, there was one teacher for every 45 ELL students. And for this upcoming year, hiring an additional 8 ELL teachers, the ratio's about 1 to 35. And then already forecasting into the 26-27 school year, we'll probably need another 8 additional ELL teachers that are currently not in this budget. But again, if we have room for improvement in our room to add more FTEs, adding more ELL teachers would be one of our first priorities. So again, you can see again the change just in the proportion or the ratio of ELL teachers to ELL students, and we've made significant progress over the last few years. Next slide, please. Again, when we put our budget together, we looked at what goes into 3 different buckets. Our first bucket is what are our federal and state mandates. In our budget, it's obvious that we have to meet our special education needs of our students. And that has been one of the biggest drivers over the last few years on what's our out-of-district tuition costs, our out-of-district transportation costs, our staffing ratio, especially with our special educators, and then our need for contract services. Again, those are all federal and state mandates of what's in students' IEPs. The next in bucket 1, that's a big cost item, just again, is the investment, and it's the right investment in our ELL teachers, and that's 8 new positions. We've been really transparent on the increase in our cost of transportation, and again, those are RSAs in which we're required to transport both our public and non-public students. And again, we're looking for some efficiencies. And then also in bucket 1 is ensuring that we have safe, warm buildings. In our bucket 2 list, when we start talking about our number of FTEs that we could support in our budget, if it's not directly classroom teachers, or we're able to swap out in some of the savings and enrollments and programs that have low enrollment, that we would switch some FTEs from a classroom teacher to an investment in math and reading interventionists, more SEL teachers, behavior technicians, or in additional BCBAs. We've been asking for social studies textbooks for the last couple years now. That would be in our bucket 2. And then also ensuring that we have a budget for our technology upgrades to ensure that we have a sound infrastructure to support all of our technology. And some of, more specifically, is around touch panels. We have some smart boards that are in a lot of our classrooms and overhead projectors that are coming to end of life, and we need to start investing on how do we project moving forward. And then in our bucket 3 is more of a wish list. In the last presentation to the Board of Education, it's more of akin to what's in the Sears catalog when we were all younger. And going through page by page, if I was able to get everything on, the Santa list, it would be in there. And those would be more innovative ed tech. And then we also look at some increases in our HR department and making sure that we have a robust HR department to change our organizational climate to make sure that people feel welcome and supported, not only in the recruitment phase, but also in the retention phase. Next slide, please.
I'll jump in if you don't mind, give you a breather. All right, so God bless you. So some high-level changes that we have in this fiscal year 26 proposed budget. I'm sure as most folks have heard, transportation cost is going up. We did go ahead and get an RFP submitted. We had only 1 response, and the overall bus contract, after several negotiations back and forth, we're looking at an overall increase of about 19%. As Dr. Andrade mentioned, we have 8 new ELL teaching positions that we are adding into this fiscal year 26 budget. We always can use more, but we're going to go ahead and propose that we hire at least 8 for fiscal year 26. The other big item to really note is we have 4 collective bargaining units that we are currently negotiating. ASME or custodials, our teacher negotiations, our paraeducators, and we have a new collective bargaining unit that is being formed for our sign language interpreters and our family engagement coordinators. Just a couple other things to highlight. Contracted services. So as Dr. Andrade mentioned, for our special education population, every single year we do see contracted services increasing. These take care of our OT, PT services, maybe some of our special educators that we cannot hire directly. So we are contracting service those folks out. For the fiscal year 26, we as a district have gone ahead and proposed that we move about $1.2 million of cost over to our special revenue accounts to hopefully offset the overall increase that we are proposing. In addition, year over year, out-of-district tuition continues to rise. Out-of-district tuition and contracted services, again, are two buckets that we can forecast, but it's not something we 100% can control. We could walk in the buildings tomorrow and have 4 new out-of-district placements. And we do support those students until the age of 22. Next slide, please. Sorry, I don't know if you wanted to add something. Turn it back over to you, Dr. Andre.
And so just in our projected or our proposed budget, these are our projected class sizes for next year. So again, we're looking at some right sizing, and there might be some elimination of positions where class sizes were small in our overall projection. But if you look at the elementary projected class sizes, that you would see for the most part, our class sizes across the schools are high teens, low 20s. So how to read it, there's 3 numbers. So we look at Amherst Street. So in K, we're projecting there's 38 students who will be in K. There would be 2 teachers, and the average class size would be 19. And that's based on where K and 1 is the same. So grade 1 is our current class size, which is, so currently at Amherst, we have 38 students, 2 teachers, and 19. Grade 2, there would be, there's 46 students, 2 teachers, 23 in a classroom. Grade 3, 54, 3 teachers, 18. So that's how the projected class sizes are at the elementary. And that was, again, some right sizing. We did a lot of work at the elementary level last year. We eliminated 9 elementary positions last year to get to this current configuration. And then, again, due to still declining enrollment, we went down an elementary position or a couple of elementary positions to get at these current numbers for next year.
I think just one thing to highlight, so if we look at Sunset Heights and we look at the 3rd grade projection class for next year, it's a little high, right? 24.3 students in a class. That's kind of a watch item for us on the district side to say, if we have a few more students potentially move in, we would propose going ahead and actually making some shifts related to FTEs and adding another 3rd grade teacher there. To Dr. Andrade's point, at Dr. Chris in Fairgrounds for kindergarten and 1st grade, those are some pretty light overall classroom sizes of 13.5. So again, from an overall FTE standpoint, if we're seeing some of the numbers increase slightly as enrollment comes in, we potentially might shift the FTE numbers slightly to the schools and the classrooms that need the most support.
So next slide is our middle school projected enrollment. Last year, we redistricted, and then we also right-sized at the middle school, and there was, again, some elimination of positions last year at the middle school. This year, there's really no, it's a rollover from last year. This is the configuration at Pennachuck Fairgrounds and McCarthy. The way to read it, Pennachuck, there's 280 students projected to be in grade 6 next year. That would be 3 teams with 4 teachers on a team with and that would be 23.3 students in a class. Fairgrounds is interesting every year. Right now, it's 218 students with 2 teams, 4 teachers on a team, and that's 27.3. Where Fairgrounds, they're the middle school that has the biggest impact on charter schools. So there's a number of 5th graders who are coming from Bicentennial who elect to go to a charter school. So the Fairgrounds numbers decreases. You can see in 7th grade, it's 197 students. But that currently is 197 in 6th grade, so that's moving up. If we looked at these numbers a year ago, Fairgrounds would be around the 220, and then we lose about 20 students to charter schools, especially at Fairgrounds. And then at McCarthy, those are our projections for the following year. And those students at McCarthy, those numbers reflect the number of intensive needs students at McCarthy as well. Next slide. So there's also a lot of questions. We don't have the high school projection because that's a master schedule, and that's really almost, if you think of a college syllabi, of how many sections run depending on how many students elect to take a class. But there's also a lot of questions on what's our elementary paraeducator determination. So we wanted to be clear in our instructional paraeducators especially. So we took the amount of students who have IEPs at each of the elementary schools and then calculated how many paras that we would currently need, again, instructional paras at each of the elementary level. And we made a determination on these allotments. So there is a shift in the number of instructional paras that we need across the district, and this is a reduction of the instructional paras. So you can see essentially at Amherst Street, there'll be 1 paraeducator almost for each grade level. And then you could see the amount of IEP hours that are needed in that building. And so if we just calculated the number of paraeducators based on IEP needs, we would only need 2.2 instructional paras at Amherst. In our budget, we're asking for 6. And then you can run down each of the elementary schools. At Bicentennial, again, there's a larger enrollment there. Instead of 1 per grade level, they would have 1 at each grade level plus 2 floaters that would actually help out in different areas. So there is, in our proposed budget, a reduction of instructional paraeducators, but you can see through this chart that there are about 100 instructional paras that will still be at the elementary, and that we are over and above the amount of hours needed in students' IEPs, and still giving the building flexibility on how to assign paraeducators. Next slide.
All right, I'll jump in, Dr. Andrade, if you don't mind. So this is a super high-level snapshot, sorry, for the large information on the screen, but this is the overall revenue that we take in year over year as the school district. There's been a lot of talk from the state and the federal government with the changes that, you know, some of our special education or our catastrophic aid is going to decrease next year. But as you can see, all the way over to the right-hand side, we're actually due for an increase related to our overall state adequacy aid. So a change from fiscal year 25 estimate to an estimate for fiscal year 26. We are seeing over a $5 million increase for state adequacy aid. That's important to know because, yes, year over year, we're starting to see special education catastrophic aid go down. But in the grand scheme of things, we're actually seeing our overall revenue increase next year. So I wanted to share that just because, you know, I kind of look at it as one pool of money, and the state, the federal government is kind of making some of those shifts. A couple other things to mention, Medicaid, we're seeing slightly go down year over year. As of right now, we're thinking we'll be about 500,000 as an estimate for next fiscal year. I think there were a couple questions related to education freedom accounts. That is the, $6,500 that is given every year for students that decide to go to another school other than their hometown. So overall, in total, we're looking at an increase in revenue for fiscal year '26. Yep. Yeah, so you want me to say it?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just further clarification.
Sorry. So from a clarification standpoint, Dr. Andre just added, so for the education freedom account, there is a calculation that needs to be done in order for the families to qualify for that full amount. Are you good?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just, my eyeballs.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't
Had to
realize it
zoom
was-
in.
I didn't realize it was behind me.
Next slide, please. All right, so this is an overall comparison from fiscal year 25's adopted budget to the fiscal year 26 budget that we have in front of you folks. The Board of Education did go ahead and approve a few weeks back a budget increase overall without benefits to be a 4.7% increase. Benefits are going up in total. Transportation, as we alluded to, is going up. Education, special education, pupil support services is going up as well. Dr. Andre, anything you wanted to mention here?
Perfect.
Okay, next slide, please. So I thought this chart, or we thought this chart would be maybe a little helpful. I think there's been some different percentages kind of kicked around there compared to what the guidance was from the mayor's office, and then what our Board of Education went ahead and approved. So at every 0.25%, it's basically a $327,000 increase. As Dr. Andre mentioned earlier in the presentation, if we're looking at a bucket 2, kind of those nice to haves, we'd add some additional math and reading interventionists, some SEL teachers, some BCBAs, some behavioral techs. If we look at the difference between the 3.5% that was originally proposed by the superintendent and where we got approved from the Board of Education, it's basically an increase overall of about 1.5 million. To take us from 4% in the blue over to the purple of 4.7, we're basically adding, or it would be an add, of about $917,000. Dr. Andre?
Yeah, and so I just want to reiterate again where, with that difference between the 3.5 or the 4.0 to the 4.7, we still have areas to invest in. Again, where a few slides ago, we still will need a number of ELL teachers. This past year, we screened an additional 300 students who qualified for ELL services. So we're projecting 8. We know we have always a changing demographic and population. So at any given time that we might need more ELL service teachers. And then the other one where, again, where the investment needs to go is around our special education. We have students who move in, require more services. So tonight is a snapshot in time, but we could have 3 or 4 new students move in to the district next year. We have to make sure that we give them a free and appropriate education, no matter what cost that's in the student's IEP. So there's still room there, and then the conversation that we would still have at the Board of Education is to ensure that we don't have a structural deficit. As Mr. Gray said earlier, there's approximately $1.2 million that we transferred into the operating budget from special revenue. We only could do that so many times without really creating a structural deficit. So with the increase of an additional $900,000, I think the Board of Education would have to have those conversations on how much are we transferring over into, from special revenue accounts, and to ensure that, again, that we're meeting students' IEPs and the out-of-district transportation, or McKinney-Vento transportation, which has a lot of unknowns. So I just want to be really transparent on it's not all of it might go into restoring all of the positions, especially if we do not have enrollment in those classrooms. And I think that came out of the BOE meeting, saying that, what will it take to restore all the positions? Some positions we may not need, or in other positions might be a reclassification. So again, if just for numbers, easy numbers, if this budget has 1,000 FTEs in it currently, and if we move forward with a 4.7, it still might have 1,000 FTEs in it, but they might have different titles. So it's, again, that investment in the salary line, not necessarily in the position or the person or at the high school running classes that just have low enrollment. So it would be a reinvestment in different positions.
I think just to clarify, so the contract services in the out-of-district tuition, we're moving $1.2 million out of what we normally cover in our operating budget over to special revenue. This year alone, we're seeing out-of-district tuition and special revenue, out-of-district tuition and contract services related to special education be about $3 million more than we anticipated. So that's how drastic the special education contract service and that out-of-district tuition bucket could be. Year over year, we've done about $5.8 million in those two lines. This current year, we're doing $6 million from a budgetary standpoint for out-of-district tuition, and next year we've bumped that up in the operating budget to $6.3 million, in addition to the money that's going over to special revenue. Next slide, please. So I think this slide here is just really a super high level of what have we as a school district come forward with in the past from an overall percentage standpoint, and what has been approved by you folks from the Board of Aldermen. We had a little bit of a decrease last year, but it wasn't enough to kind of swing the 4.49 is my understanding. Next slide. I think that's it, actually.
No, that was too fast.
All right. Sorry. Oh, the last slide was too fast. Sure, you can go back.
Thank you.
There's going to be a copy that's put in the minutes.
I got it.
I think just a couple things to, kind of offset and reiterate. I continue to say, it's not really a joke, but, that the ESSER money tree is no longer in our backyard, right? So I think we as a district have been a little accustomed to some of the services and some of the items that potentially have been offset by ESSER funds over the last several years. And at this point, ESSER is no longer in play from a federal funding standpoint.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go through the various pages of the budget and prompt questions. And revenues for the school department are on, basically it's page 41, because page 142 is food service, which is self-funded, and 2 or 3 are just general numbers. So are there any questions from the Budget Committee on the revenues on page 41? Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. There was a slide that you presented that, and I just jotted this down, 5 million more that we're getting from, I would assume it's the state. And you said it comes in one big bucket, even though there were some lines in there that were empty. Can you just tell me, please, how that money gets allocated, even though it, I mean, does it, stupid question, I know, does it just arrive in the fund and we can spend it, as long as it goes towards education, we can spend it however, wherever we need it, as long as it's earmarked for education?
Want to jump in first, and then you can finish? So my understanding of the revenue is all the revenue comes directly to the city of Nashua, because the benefits are covered by the city of Nashua. So even though we are seeing a over $5 million increase in state adequacy aid, my understanding is that goes directly to the city. Now, I say it's one pool because it kind of offsets, right, some of our expenses that we need compared to the revenue that's coming in. There are a couple blanks on that revenue slide because the estimates just aren't out this year quite yet. As soon as we get those, we absolutely will go ahead and send those over. But my understanding is everything does come in to the city of Nashua, and then you folks kind of disperse it out. Dr. Andre?
Yeah, so, yeah, the simple answer, all revenues come to the city, and then the city apportions the amount of adequacy aid. You know, it's usually, it's 100% is reassigned to the school district, but it's the Board of Aldermen and the mayor that controls the adequacy aid.
Okay.
And then same thing with Medicaid reimbursement. Those revenues go directly to the city and not to the Department of Education.
Okay. So,
Exactly how they're handled would probably be a question for treasurer.
okay. Follow up?
Yes, follow up, Alderman Sullivan?
So the headline that I got is we're getting $5 million more than we did last year. That's what I heard. Okay. The other question I had, and it seems a little silly to talk about a $50,000 line item against a budget of $192 million, but it's to the education freedom accounts. Last year in this very same meeting, Mr. Gray's predecessor said on the record, they have no effect on the city of Nashua. And I would welcome a characterization of that from Mr. Gray or yourself, Dr. Andre, as you've now been in the role for an additional year. And then exactly how that works, because if $50,000, that's a revenue line. So does that mean that even though the state may award $6,500 to a qualified student, we then get reimbursed for what we would have gotten anyway? Can you just help me understand that a little bit better?
Yes.
No,
You
go
want to
ahead.
start?
You start.
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit more of like we're losing that revenue, right? So that money, the money falls to student, which is, again, it's hard to argue against that, right? So it's only $50,000, as you say. But the other expenses do not go down either, right? So we're losing 50 students and we saw a declining enrollment. So what's that doing over to our overall class sizes? You know, so there's unintended consequences to that as well, that again, our expenses are not going down. So it's $50,000 plus we still need an educator for our classroom. So losing 50 students, we're not reducing any teachers, we're not reducing a bus off the road, we're not reducing our electricity costs. So we're getting hit on really both for the Ed Trust Fund, but also our adequacy and our reimbursement to the adequacy revenue coming in. Also interesting for the Ed Trust Fund, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but there's a formula on who, like, the families who qualify for that. So that might impact our Title I reimbursement and revenue streams or other areas. So I think it's much more than $50,000, and there's unintended consequences of students kind of leaving the district. And it's not, our charter schools are not, students are not, families are not qualifying for the Ed Trust at this point. But that could be another impact further down the line. So it's just right now, there's just not a lot of families taking advantage of that. But again, I think to your question, is unintended consequences just to the $50,000 that are baked into other areas of net loss.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, could I just add? I think in addition to the state adequacy aid, right, that is based off of a calculation of the number of students that we as the Nashua School District have. So of course, if some of those families are getting that educational freedom benefit and they're moving to a different school of their choice, then yes, our overall state adequacy aid number is going to decrease as well.
Okay.
So to your point, it is more than a $50,000 reduction, give or take, depending on how many students go ahead and take advantage of
No, that's good. That's really good. Thank you. Appreciate it. No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, on page 41, by the way, there's a $6 million increase in revenues. The revenues are going to offset the expenses, so. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What's the price of a high school bus ticket?
Yeah, it's $65.
Just 65? For some reason, I thought it was over 100. So, continue to follow
Follow
up.
up.
Do we charge BG the same as we charge the high school for a ticket?
I believe so.
So, what about the non-public schools at the middle school level? Do they get anything? Do they have to pay anything for that?
Are you talking the charter schools, like
St. Chris.
ASD, St. Chris? No, they are not,
So
they
they
do
don't charge
not.
at all? So if we only transported public school kids, would that be any kind of savings at all?
It's about $1.2 million.
And follow up?
Follow up.
So why do we have to, what is the reason we do that, I guess?
It's required by state law.
It is required by state law? Okay. So Nashua has to pick that up, and we don't get anything from the state for doing that?
No.
Can I just add some clarity? Maybe it would help. So to Dr. Andrade's point, we actually had a meeting last week with the charter schools to talk about, as we go into tighter budgets and an increase, right, in the overall bus contract, how can we work with them to truly go ahead and save some cost as well? We are going to try our hardest to take 4 buses off the road for next year. So each bus is roughly $80,000 per year that we pay the cost to. So we're hopeful that we can do a $320,000 reduction to take 4 buses off the road. In order to do that, we are going to have to work with these charter schools to make sure we're being safe first with our students to go ahead and transport them to Nashua or the charter schools, but also make sure we're being as efficient as possible to save some of that money.
Yeah, and so, if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
just to follow Mr. Gray's answer and to elaborate, the charter schools were really cooperative last year. They were looking for solutions, and when we looked at our ridership on some of the, especially the high school charters, there's not a lot of high school students that take buses. So we're running a bus right now that has 19 students on it at 80,000, right? So there is room for some more efficiencies, and they were very open to that. This year, we can adjust their bus time, their bell times, but in the future years, we may be able to adjust bell times for more efficiencies. For BG students, it's almost a depot stop. So they go to the high schools, and then we run a shuttle from the high schools over to BG. So it's not a separate run. They're actually on the high school runs, and then we run a shuttle from there. So a little efficiency as well, but great question. Thank you.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question in regard to the state adequacy aid. You had talked a little bit about how that comes down to us in Nashua. It's delivered to the city. We appropriate it to the school department, usually in terms of 100%. Once you have your hands on it, it's in the hands of the Board of Education's Budget Committee, what have you. What sort of restrictions do you have on that? Because one of the concerns I have is seeing this number jump up to the tune of, my quick math, 7.1 million, and seeing special education aid flatlined. So is there any mechanism on the Board of Education side to be able to take some of that increase that we've seen for state adequacy and appropriate it to the special education programs?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we end up doing.
Okay.
So, right, so just again, where those needs are, and the restrictions might be in IDEA with federal funding, Title I, Title II, 24, that's all assigned, and there's restrictions there. But in our operating budget, there's no restrictions unless by the Board of Education that says we're assigning X amount of dollars to a certain account. But you'll see in our transfers each month, if we're over or above, that's all through our operating budget that we can reassign that money, similar to the Board of Aldermen, to those areas of need. So that revenue coming in for adequacy aid can be assigned. There's no restrictions on our behalf.
Just for clarification, once we pass the budget, any money's allocated to the school department goes over to their control, and they can move them around as they see fit. And we have no more control over it after we give them, past the budget.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. That's why I was asking about the restrictions once it's in their hands.
Yeah, then they can just transfer them. Yes, follow up?
Yes, and I just want to revisit the bus question one more time, just because it's the thorn in everybody's side. I know that the charter schools in the area are sort of in a, I guess you'd call it a growth pattern right now. One in particular that I know of was elementary, and then it was elementary and middle school, and now we're looking at exploring the options of going into high school. I actually don't know off the top of my head if any of the charter schools cover high school. I think one of them does. But in the event that they do, and we're providing that transportation, are we charging that same $65 for a bus ticket to charter school students as well?
Yeah, at this time, we are not. It is not something we as a district have done in the past.
And is there any particular reason for that?
I think you raise a very valid question. I think, there's been a lot of kind of poking holes of why are we charging for our students but not the charter schools, especially as they continue to increase their overall enrollment.
I'll just end on an open-ended, would we please?
Yes, Alderwoman Kelly?
Thank you. So I think we're still on revenues, correct? We've kind of been general in conversation. So first line in revenues is around Medicaid distributions. Last year, you budgeted about $800,000, but so far, it looks like the revenue's only been a little bit less than $200,000. Can you talk about that? And then I see that you brought your budget down a little bit for this year.
So, yep. So that is based on an overall percentage. That percentage has gone down. And sorry, the revenue slide that I shared on screen had fiscal year 25 as of a certain date. I think it was March. And then it was actuals for the prior years and a forecast for fiscal year 26. We are seeing a decrease in the overall Medicaid reimbursement. The year prior, I think it was right around 88%, and then it dropped to 62%. So we as a district always submit for the Medicaid. We never know what is that percentage we're gonna get back until they actually pay it out. That is the reason why we went ahead and dropped that to $500,000 as an estimate of revenue for next fiscal year.
Follow up, please.
Follow up, Alderwoman Kelly?
So when you're looking for these reimbursements, is that around the PT, OT, contract services? What types of things are you able to apply for?
So that is related to any special education services that are required within the IEP. So it could be the OT, PT services. They usually are para-educators, and our staff goes ahead and submits for the Medicaid reimbursement, and then depending on what gets approved is the back of what we receive from a revenue standpoint.
I'll hold my other questions. Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. I don't want to beat the dead horse of the busing, but where are we leaving it right here this evening? Are you going to look at a study to charge charter school students to $65 to transport them? Because there seems to be a big gap here. And when I was up at the State House for 16 years, the other side of the aisle told me, charter schools are public schools. Well, that doesn't sound fair. If we're paying their busing and then another kid, it seems unfair and prejudicial.
Just in fairness, I don't think they can answer the question because that'll be a decision of the Board of Education and.
Well, I would like to see if this board can, the Budget Committee can say, if it could help out, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
to direct them and to look at that.
We can definitely give them a suggestion to do that.
That's what I would like. Thank you, sir.
Alderman Dow.
Yes.
If I could
Dr.
just
Andre?
respond to that. So we'll be more than happy, again, I think the charter schools were very cooperative. In general, there's 60 students who are taking the bus at $65. So I think it's in principle, because it's around $4,000 that we would receive. So it's not going to pay for the bus of a transportation, but I think it's more in principle saying, can you contribute? So I just wanted to put a number on how much revenue we would be looking at.
I think it's a fairness issue rather than a monetary
Correct.
issue.
Yeah.
Alderman Lopez?
Well, okay, so I actually originally asking about the state adequacy. That's a forecasted number, and is that a predictable number?
Yes, it's a very predictable number. Year over year, they've always gone ahead and done a forecast for us. They just recently updated it prior to us submitting our proposal over to the city. And within a couple percentages, they've been fairly accurate.
Is there any possibility that politics could be used to say, you have to cut certain programs if you don't, or you don't get that at the state level?
I think there's always a hypothetical, right? I mean, I think new administration potentially could make a decision tomorrow, and that could potentially be less than what we're anticipating. But I think this far into their forecast of what's going to be given to us as of July 1st, I don't see that drastically changing.
Okay, and it is important to focus on this immediate budget year. I only brought it up because we made a comment about making sure that the funding tree that wasn't growing in our yard anymore isn't assumed to still be there. And I don't know if volatility at federal and state politics could suggest that we do need to look at a more local approach to education to ensure that we can weather any of those changes. With regards to the bus transportation, seems like we're extremely vulnerable to having one vendor available for buses. And I had a conversation with Superintendent Andre, I don't know if you remember, when there was some community concern about a potential bus strike earlier this year. And it's my understanding we don't have any alternative capacity. We don't have like, oh, we have 12 backup buses and we could do it for some students and not others, or we could roll. Do we have any contingency plans or any alternatives, or is this maybe something that we should be considering as at least a fallback if we do have contractual issues?
So I think it's a longer term, just, again, we went through a process, we went out for an RFP. We had 5 or 6 transportation vendors attend the meeting for informational, but unfortunately for our student was the only vendor who submitted a contract. We did have some offline conversations with the mayor's office on, again, if we forecast a few years out, if we took transportation in-house and what that cost would be. So, so we did have some offline conversations on what would that look like. Again, Ms. DeGray can, because she knows the numbers, because she's in that transportation. There's one aspect on how many regular ed buses big yellow buses that are on the road, there's a significant amount of special education buses that I think it's, again, where we had the conversation, if the Nashua Transit Authority was like taking the regular ride, what's that?
I was just saying, bless you.
For the Nashua Transit Authority, like if they were gonna take over the regular big runs, that would solve a little bit of the problem, but they don't go into all the neighborhoods, we would still have some issues. And the bigger deficit we would be in is our special education buses. There's about 40 special education buses transporting, again, almost 2,000 special education students who require special education services or transportation part of their IEP, and that's, again, a big cost.
So for context, we had talked about only a short term, like, we need to make sure some students who absolutely need to be in the schools are able to at least rotate and maybe come for half a day at a time, and we didn't really have the capacity to pull that off. So my, I guess, hope would be, is there some way to talk to the different charter schools or private schools and figure out some kind of cost-sharing program where maybe we could build some kind of contingency so that maybe we're not entirely reliant on one vendor to provide everything?
Yeah,
If I can just add a couple more, I guess, bullet points or some details. So we have 40 special education buses. I think I heard a few, wow. And we have 54 regular buses. So as of right now, we run day-to-day about 94 buses in total. And that is a mix between our Nashua School District students and our charter school students. When we went out for the RFP, to Dr. Andrade's point, we had 5 to 6 vendors that came in from an informational session standpoint. As we talked with the Board of Education, we actually only had the one response by first student. In addition, STA is one of the other big organizations throughout the state that does provide bus transportation. They didn't even bid just because of the overhead it would cost for them to go ahead and have a specific presence here with Nashua. So again, we've looked at a couple different options. I think if the city truly wanted to take it in-house year over year, we probably would see a pretty substantial increase to our budget. We'd have to hire the drivers, the personnel, all of that to truly run these buses day in and day out.
So we did a back of the envelope thing. You'd have to buy the buses through SURF. The buses aren't cheap. There's over 100 buses. You would have to have a facility to keep them. First Student has a significant facility here in Nashua for the whole district. They do several cities in the area, and they're a nationwide company. They have millions of buses. And you'd have to hire mechanics, you'd have the fuel and the tire cost and the maintenance. It would be prohibitive. Yes.
Just one other point, and Mr. Gray we can give, but we keep on hearing about transportation. Just to put it in context, even though it's going up 18%, which is a lot of money, like we're not going to deny that. But this, we have to remember, it was a pre-COVID contract for a student. And then when we look at our comps with surrounding districts, we're still on the cheaper side. So by a large number. So the number could have been much higher for a student. So again, I think where there's an aspect on, we see an 18% increase. It's been much higher in other districts for a number of years, and I think, again, we have a good relationship with our student. I think they gave a respectable, again, I think it's still a lot of money over the course of the next couple of years, but it is still cheaper than our surrounding districts. So again, we hear about it, but if we do comparisons from district to district, we are not significantly above. We're still below a number of our neighboring districts, so that is the cost of transportation, unfortunately.
Alderwoman Kelly?
I want to put the bow on the school bus conversation. So you started to answer it, but I wanted to know if we had a percentage of high school ridership. And you don't have, if you don't have the answer right now, that's fine. It just came to my mind because I grew up in a very small town and we didn't have to pay for our schools. So I was kind of hoping that the ticketing is to allow us to adjust how many
So
buses we have.
if I may.
Yes, Dr.
So we
Henry.
do have ridership for every bus, and we try to consolidate as much as possible. And we, at the high schools, we see ebb and flows, it depends on the sports season or how many kids are involved with after-school activities. And then also the fluctuation is around when students get licenses. And then, I don't know if Ms. Bishop may be one of these families, but there are a number of families who will pay for a ticket and never ride the bus,
Yeah.
just in case. Right. Just shocking, right? So, so some of our numbers, we have a number of students who, again, ride the bus or buy a bus pass, but never ride. So we look at almost, how do we schedule for like 120% capacity, because we know at the high school, not everyone's gonna ride the bus. And then our land area is just so large that we don't want students on the bus more than an hour. So how do we consolidate routes, but sometimes they're just all over the back roads of Nashua that it's hard to consolidate.
Thank you.
So-
But I'll be more than happy to send you the ridership numbers by bus.
So
Thank you.
we have, as Alderman, we have numerous people that say, oh my God, I see the buses, there's nobody in them. But there's somebody paying for those seats, for the most, and you do 120%. Question I have is, are there people that get bus tickets that don't have to pay for it because of free or reduced lunch?
Yes.
Do you know what percentage that is? Offhand, roughly, globally?
Oh, sorry. So 34% was the latest update that we saw on the forecast that we've been running for transportation.
The other question I have is, how much do they pay at the high school for parking?
$65.
65? And do free and reduced lunch get free parking? It always questioned me, in my mind, you're there for free and reduced lunch, but you own a car? That doesn't quite equate. And I do know that I can tell you for sure, because I visit both of the high schools all too frequently, those parking lots are full. And they're gonna become a little fuller in a couple of weeks. It's Janet, I know. Has there been any consideration of raising the cost based on the fact that the bus costs went up?
There has not. We actually just had the Board of Education meeting, we just talked about increases in athletic fees. But again, not for student parking. But we want to be cognizant on our families of how much we're asking families to contribute.
Well, the only good news on that front is at least we're not in the position Manchester's in. But I always felt that paying excessive amounts for participating in sports, when you do that, you have healthier students who learn better. And I can tell you from personal experience, some of our athletes have gone on to professional careers and end up donating a lot of money back to charities here locally. And, a lot of kids get into college from their athletic ability. So I would hate to make it so prohibitive for students to be in athletics that they wouldn't have an opportunity with that. So I think that's it for my questions for page 41. I don't think anybody has any questions on the lunch programs, because that's, so if not, we'll move on to appropriations. And appropriations are on page 112. Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. My question is around wages. I just jotted down here that wages full-time, the very first line, goes from 94,035,000 to 94,218,000, less than $200,000. How are we flat on wages if we're adding 8 ELL teachers? First question. Second question is more general, but hopefully pointed. If you currently work in the national school system right now as a teacher, today, in April of 2025, are you, with this budget as you proposed, is everyone going to have a job at the start of next school year?
Right?
Okay, so with the wages overall, so there is a slight increase, Alderman Sullivan, as you mentioned, and there should be another line item on that same page, in addition to the 4 collective bargaining units that we are currently negotiating. So I think if we add a couple lines together, you'll see the overall anticipated increase for wages. With wages being flat and us adding an additional 8 ELL teachers, there was a reduction last year in some of the schools, which that's why there's an offset. It doesn't look like as much of an increase with the 8 positions because there was a reduction last year. And then April of, Dr. Andre, did you want to jump in? April of 2025. So my understanding, and Dr. Andre can correct me if I'm wrong, there were 4 to 5 RIF letters that did go out to personnel that they would no longer have a position. Most of the staff are able to do a involuntary transfer because of their skills and certification. They're able to move into an open position. So that is why it kind of looks a little more flat than probably a pretty drastic increase. Dr. Andre, did I miss anything?
No, yeah. So again, the headline is for the teaching, right? For the teaching staff,
Yes.
it's a reduction of 5 positions. And then again, where we were projecting 47, like with a 3.5, we were able in the last couple of weeks to find, those educators are able to fill other open positions, so we don't have to repost those. And then I mentioned earlier around paraeducators, so even with the reduction in paraeducators and what we need, there's open positions that we would, people can transfer in without losing their job. And not getting too far ahead, that if we can fill some of those positions, it could be actually a decrease in contracted services if we fill internally first.
Okay.
So if you see that last line in the top there, it's
Last line.
salary requirements, salary.
Adjustments. Salary
Salary adjustments is $2.9 million. That's the, we used to have that as a contingency and move it into the city's budget and then give it back to them when the contracts are passed.
Okay.
But this year, whatever reason, the mayor and the treasurer have decided to keep that money in the individual accounts.
Uh-huh.
So that's basically their contingency for salary negotiations.
Okay. Just to follow up.
Follow up, Alderman Sullivan?
Just for clarification, so Mr. Gray, you mentioned other lines, that's the other line, 51,900, salaries and adjustments. So I should take the first line and the last line, and that's really what I should be looking at when I'm comparing year over year.
Can I make a suggestion?
Agree?
Open to it.
I actually think you should take all of those 51 accounts, which are all your wage accounts, and add them together. So there was a slide that I shared based off of the proposed budget. So we are seeing an increase of about $3.4 million in total labor, total wages. The wages are broken up, of course, between full-time wages and part-time wages, in addition to that salary salary adjustment line based off of the contracts that are outstanding. So in total, if you kind of look at all the wages together, it should be an overall estimated increase of a $3.4 million increase.
So you see all those lines? The other question I had is wages per diem?
Yep.
Just explain that for the general audience.
So the wages per diem usually are some of our teachers that are covering if there's another teacher that is out.
Okay. And additional hours?
Additional hours is normally any duties and responsibility that personnel is doing outside of their normal job. So additional hours could be, they might be doing some work on a federal grant. Additional hours, as we're getting into the nicer weather, there's going to be some additional hours for some of our maintenance keepers.
So if they were working under a grant, that would be paid for by the grant, correct? So in the military, we used to call this other duties as assigned. So
Familiar with that.
when they have to do something that's not in their contract, they have to get paid for it.
Okay.
So it's that whole block that's the salary
Okay.
issue. Follow up, Alderman Sullivan?
Fair to say that of the $10 million increase that we see in front of us, 3.4 million of that is in wages.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
You're saying 10 million because you're including benefits, is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am, I am. I do
Remember,
that.
they don't have no control over benefits.
I understand that, but I include the benefits because it's a full picture of what we're looking at.
So yes, I would agree, 10 million is overall budget increase, which includes your benefits.
Yep.
3.4 million is your wages or your labor increase.
All right.
Just
thank
for
you.
another quick follow-up, the benefits, even though they're in their budget, the benefits are all paid out of City Hall.
I understand.
Alderman Kelly?
Yes.
Or the right down the line?
I got lots of questions. Let's go. Okay. So I attended the school board meeting where we were discussing your budget. You guys had prepared 3.5. We're here for 4.7. I'm looking at your budget priorities slide, which I loved. I wasn't fully following how the next slide, the additions, really tracked against those numbers. So I didn't see a 3.5. Is 3.5 your no buckets? So maybe, can we pull out the slide by any chance? I'm looking at the budget additions, so you got bucket 2 is 3.75.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Lord.
That one?
Nope,
That one?
that one.
Not this one.
So was 3.5 only bucket 1? That's question 1.
Yes. That's kind of rolling over. Again, if we go back to, like, what's in bucket 1 is all our federal and state requirements. That's our ELL teachers, special education, right? And so those are, I hate to say, more than non-negotiables.
Of course.
Right? So that's, like, that's what we have to do. And then the 3.75, again, how many math and reading interventionists we need. So I'll give a couple examples. There's a couple elementary schools that say, I need more math and reading interventionists over our classroom teacher. So we would go back, look at our data, and then increase, as Mr. Gray said, if we have $327,000 for every quarter, how many positions would that we could add back into the budget? So it would be, again, SEL teachers, math interventionists. We didn't break it down by salary of how many that would be, but that, again, just in that, for every $327,000, those major investments would be around interventionists, SEL teachers, social workers, the wraparound services. And I think, again, that night that you were at the Board of Education meeting, you were hearing, how do we support the whole child? And that's where any increase over 3.5 wouldn't be directly, again, picking on like a high school or a middle school. I went and added like a grade 3 teacher based on class sizes. I would add another social worker or those wraparound services.
If I could follow up?
Follow up?
So 375, are these positions reallocated positions like you were just talking about? Like you might take someone from a grade 3 and put them into a math and we actually heard from someone who said, oh, I'm a math interventionist. I used to be. Is that what you would see?
Yeah, and so that's where we talked about, again, if we were eliminating positions, we would reprioritize where those investments would be. So I wouldn't hire, again, picking on a grade 3 teacher, right? But if we got the 4.75, right, I would be having those conversations, not decreasing class sizes at some of the elementary, but we would reapportion the money to SEL teachers or those wraparound services.
May I just add something? I think in addition to what Dr. Andrade is saying, I just, for the record, want to be clear again that like contract services and out-of-district tuition continues to increase. So even though for fiscal year '26, we went ahead and moved $1.2 million over to special revenue, I think if we continue to do that year over year, we're going to be in some type of structural deficit. Because I almost look at the special revenue accounts as like that savings or that safety net. So I do understand we'll want to reduce some of our special revenue accounts, but we're not going to want to sustain that year over year. So I would say if we actually get the 4.7% increase, in addition to what Dr. Andrade said, I would advocate for us being able to put some of that money back towards contract services for special education and out-of-district tuition, just where it's going to be almost $3 million over budget this year.
Follow up?
Follow up?
So to that point, one of my other questions was around paras and moving them to like floating district para versus tied to a school. I know you talked about that a little bit. Is that also an opportunity to bring down that other contracted services line?
So we currently have 6 openings for instructional paras, but we have 30 openings for district-wide paras. And so that's where the area of need is, and so the district-wide paras that's where we're going out for the contracted services. So we would fill those district-wide paras, again, and that would eliminate the amount that we're contracting out to agencies. That's our area of need.
And follow up? Are those 30 para positions in this budget?
Yes.
Okay. I'll yield for a moment. I have about 10 more questions.
It's like the other divisions. If they don't budget for them, they can't hire them. That goes police, fire.
I just didn't know if they were going to budget by attrition.
Yes. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you. Yeah, I got a lot too. First, quick question, because Alderwoman Kelly just brought it up. So are we looking at a 4% budget or 4.7? I know it went to 4.7 at the BOE meeting, but I thought the mayor had come back that slashed some of it down to 4%. Is that not accurate?
So we're presenting tonight a 4.7.
So you guys are bringing to us a 4.7? Okay. Follow-up?
Yeah, the mayor's reduction, I believe, is $917,427
That's what he's,
from the budget they submitted.
That's what's in the budget book.
So
okay.
if I may?
Yeah.
So my understanding, working with the treasurer's office and the comptroller, yes, there was a reduction from the mayor down to 4%. So we went ahead, I worked with the city to do an adjustment of about 900,000, just over 900,000 to get us to 4%. My understanding, the understanding here, we brought 4.7 forward because that's what our Board of Education voted on.
Okay. Follow-up. So, I mean, so one quick comment is we talk about benefits, and this is not just with the Board of Education, but we do have impact on benefits because we could reduce city staff all over the city if we really wanted to have an impact. Because
Well,
we got
yes,
less people.
except that it wouldn't be done in their area, it'd be done over here.
Correct, but I mean, I think to
They
Alderman
adjust the
Sullivan's point,
benefits to meet the
we look at the
people
whole
we hire.
picture. So, I'm going to bring up a couple of things that are probably not going to be too well received. So you mentioned structural deficit. I mean, we literally had a structural deficit last year where we needed roofs, and 4.5 million was, I don't even know what the word is, mismanaged or whatever that we had to come up with. So you guys had to come back to the board. So I'm concerned about things like that. I still have that in the back of my mind. The other piece that people aren't gonna like is you keep saying the enrollment goes down, but yet even though the enrollment goes down, the costs go up because the student cost is still going up. You guys have talked about this for 2 years, and I'm not saying I'm for this, so I don't want anything in the paper that Alderman Tebow wants to reduce schools. But you guys have talked about this for a long time. If the enrollment continues to go down and the student body count goes down, where is the reduction of a school or schools? Where is that in the financial plans going forward? Is that still something the Board of Education is working on?
Yes,
If
Dr.
I
Andrew?
may. So there's two things going on right now. The Board of Aldermen approved a facility study, and I think that recommendation will come out in that study. We just had a kickoff meeting on last Wednesday with the vendor who's going to be doing it. So I think you'll see that study come out within the next 8 months. And I think that's going to be a good city conversation, because I think it is a mutual, where's the future of Nashua schools? What does it look like? We are all on the same page. We heard from Director Sullivan talking about like city planning going forward in the projections. I don't think the numbers are going to be that far off, but I think that's going to be a really pivotal conversation. I think we're able to, in this budget, hopefully in collaboration with the Board of Aldermen, to meet this year's budget without closing a school, but I think that's a potential savings next year. So not to rush the decision this year to close a school and lose focus on what we can do, what we can control, but I think that's definitely a savings next year. And I think where the bigger aspect is, are we as a city all in agreement with the numbers say? What's the investment? So when we get the facility studies back, and we heard Alderman Dowd in a number of conversations, like, we have a lot of assets. How are we going to protect them? And I think we're going to have a clear plan on what's a good investment and what's not a good investment in our buildings. And so that might be an area that comes out in consolidating buildings. At the same time, we are also embarking on our 5-year strategic plan. And I think that's going to be a conversation too, that some aspect of redistricting will come out at the elementary. So it is on our radar. It's not part of this budget. Quite honestly, we had a conversation of, can we meet the needs this year, meet those savings, and then there's a potential savings next year. If that's around, we said it's about $1.2, $1.3 million. If we close a school, that's an area of savings next year that we can present to the Board of Aldermen.
Just one last follow-up. More of a statement. Thank you for that. I think that's one of the better answers you've given me. I know I've been critical with you in the past. I think, the worst thing about having to listen to the education budget is not being able to line item anything or make amendments. Just a yes or no, do we want to pass it or not? Because, yes or no is very, very wide. So, somebody might say no and only be against one little part of it, but yet at the end of the day, you want to make sure things are in there for the students, right? So it's always that fine line of all we get to do is yes or no. So, and hope that whatever we put forward to you guys, as Board of Ed and yourselves, can do it in a way that hopefully, fits the values and what we want for the city for our students. So, we kind of put our faith and trust in the Board of Ed and you guys. So, thank you for that answer.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to my colleague from Ward 8 for kind of leading into my questions, which, because of the nature of what we can and can't do here, are more philosophical. I was hoping you could assist me to start by going back to, you had a slide that sort of demonstrated the allocation of paraprofessionals throughout the different schools. If you could pull that up. That's the one, yeah. So I'm trying to understand this better, and I'm going to compare two schools that probably couldn't be more different if they tried. I'm looking at something like Bicentennial that has 49.5 daily IEP hours with a determination of the need for 1.7 full-time paras, and they're allocated 8. And then I go to Dr. Crisp with 114 IEP hours with a calculated need of 3.8, and they're allocated 7. What's the mechanism behind this? Help me understand this better, because it seems Dr. Crisp is disproportionately loaded with the need for IEP hours, but they're carrying one less paraprofessional.
So Bicentennial also has about 200 more students.
Sure, yeah.
Right, so that's some of it. And then again, what's in IEP? So we looked at almost one instructional para-educated per grade level. And so at Dr. Crisp, there's 2 or 3 classes per grade level, where Bicentennial, there's 5. So
Okay.
we have more of the economy of scale at Dr. Crisp.
So you're working on distributing them throughout the individual classrooms?
Right, and then
Okay.
the other aspect of, again, this is operating budget. So in Title I, there's also para-educators that are at Dr. Crisp that are not at Bicentennial.
All right.
So there's other federal funds that actually support Dr. Crisp, and Bicentennial's a non-Title I school, so there's more resources at Dr. Crisp than Bicentennial.
Follow up on that, topic. Thank you. So as we contemplate paras, I'm not an educator, I'm just a parent. Para, to me, is sort of a very broad term. However, I do have a little bit of familiarity with IEPs and whatnot. When I consider a para, am I considering some of the specialists that I've met through my own experience, say somebody who's in the school, I know they work district-wide, providing vision-related services for students whose IEPs are vision-based, or services that are motor skills, occupational therapy?
So that motor skills, so that's an OT or a PT, that's a different position.
So those are different classified positions from a
So,
paraprofessional?
and we have different ranges of paraeducators. So we have district-wide paraeducators that would be working more in intensive needs classrooms. So students with more severe disabilities, and they might be working on, at the elementary, like discrete trials on numbers, letters, colors, pre-primer reading, students who can't read, but also toilet skills. That's more of a district-wide para. Instructional paras might be assigned to a grade level and helping students with reading or math or some classroom management, taking some data on task behaviors. So it's, I have a ton of respect for paras, so I don't want to diminish the importance that they have in the classroom, but it is more working with a teacher on small class instruction. It might be reading or math support. It might be an IEP or it might not be an IEP, but they're not at the level of a teacher, but it's a different kind of role. But it's OT, PT, audio, students or other educators who are moving around are specialized, and they're in the teacher's contract.
Okay,
So that's, again, I don't want to minimize the amount of what our instructional powers are doing, so where you might see that second adult in the classroom who might be guiding instruction, small group, making sure students are getting their English and math instruction, but they're not that classroom teacher. And they do a lot more than, I don't like when people are like, it's a classroom helper, right? They're much more than a classroom helper. So I don't want to diminish their importance, but again, there's a line in there.
Follow up?
Yes, I wouldn't assume that you'd diminish the work that they do, and even if you did, I wouldn't let you do it unchecked, so we're all good there. I did have another question, again, just regarding the budgeting philosophy, how we've put all this information together. You don't need to move to the slides, but just looking at the buckets, I know bucket 1 was sort of classified as mandates, but also needs. We need safe and warm buildings. We are mandated to do certain things by state or federal regulations. One of the things that struck me, and this could just be a different of ideology, but looking in bucket 2, the first thing that you had was math and reading interventionists, which to a certain extent I get, but I kind of struggle with putting that position under a nice to have when I'm sure all of us have heard from our constituents, the concerns about how Nashua performs in the aggregate, how Nashua stacks up to the rest of the school districts throughout the state. And it feels like 2 of those core subjects, having the interventionists to jump in and work with the kids who may be struggling in those subjects, to me personally, that feels like it would be a have to have versus a nice to have. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how different items land in different buckets.
Yeah, and again, this isn't an exact science of where the buckets kind of fall, but also being respectful of our requests coming in, right? We don't want to come in with an 8% saying we need everything is in bucket 1. So if we had to prioritize, again, what's our federal and state mandates. The other aspect, again, I think there's 2 things going on if you look at our overall BOE goals, is really reinforcing our Tier 1 instruction. And so sometimes we have to be careful on, we're not intervening on interventions. So sometimes if we have too much in intervention, we're not exposing our students to grade level standards. So there needs to be, again, a bigger emphasis on what are our grade level standards as opposed to more interventions. Like the old phrase, rising tide lifts all boats. So if we're able to provide better Tier 1 instruction, we might need less interventionists. So again, not that it's in bucket 2, but if we have a tight budget of a 3.5 or whatever it's going to be of where we're investing, we will look at, again, the offset of do we need social emotional like teachers, right? Like in that aspect, or math interventionists. And, some of the interventionists could be done through special education. We have reading instruction. So I don't want to say it's not bucket 1, but again, it's not mandated by law. So if we don't have those positions, we're not required to. That's why it's that bucket 2, but it's not an exact science.
One more if I could.
Follow up?
Yes, my last question, and I don't, if all you've really got is a bird's eye view of it, that's fine. I was just wondering if there's any sort of identified factors that causes, you had called out fairgrounds as having a heavier than the others impact on departures to charter schools. And I was wondering if you could just speak to that, because I know we heard at the budget presentation meeting, I wasn't there, but I did review it. We heard a lot about the middle schools, and in particular, one that struck me was almost a difference of perception, maybe from the administration or the district, versus the folks on the ground at Pennachuck. And that stood out to me because I'm a product of Pennachuck. What is it that, I almost said like, what's going on at Pennachuck that we don't know, but what is it about fairgrounds that's driving people out?
Yeah. So it's the sending schools, the sending elementary schools. So there's families from Bicentennial, New Searles, that area. That from 5th grade, they're going to a charter school. And quite honestly, we track that data. A lot of those families come back at high school, and that's been the trend for years. It's not fairgrounds in particular, it's the sending elementary schools in the neighborhoods.
So sort of just sitting out middle school here in Nashua.
Yeah, and again, if I may, just the difference in Pennachuck is it's been a cultural shift. And that's, I think some of it is through the redistricting. And so when we're looking at some of the changes in behavior, it's, I don't want to oversimplify it, but some of the issues that we're having at Pennachuck are some of the conversations we had at Elm Street. And so we're seeing a change in demographic at Pennachuck that's, I think, it's leading to some of the shift in culture.
Well, you sort of just touched on what I was sort of thinking in the back of my head, because I'm a product of Pennachuck myself. My wife is Elm Street alumnus.
Yeah.
So, you know, we kind of bring two different perspectives to the table. And when I told her what I had heard at that meeting, she was kind of shocked. She says, you know what, I wouldn't expect, like, that's what I hear, that's what I know from Elm Street, you know? You know, how's that happening at Pennachuck? And those are the sort of things she actually left Elm Street to try to escape. And that's all I've got for now. Thank you very much.
Yes. Alderwoman Kelly?
Yes. So I have a bit of a pointed question for the chair of the school board. I know that the meeting that we were just discussing, the original was 3-5. You were one of the descending votes on the 4-7. Can you explain for everyone who wasn't able to attend?
Well, as the chair of the Board of Education, I fully support my board in the majority vote in the 4.7 ask that they're requesting. My dissent was in regards to being a team player within the entire city and recognizing that other departments were experiencing reductions in budgets, and it didn't feel neighborly to ask for more, and police and fire and public health getting less. So,
Thank you.
but I fully support my board and what they want.
Thank you.
Tebow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, at that meeting, the original obviously was 3.5. I stood up and I said, ask for what you need, and, you know, the mayor can slash it or send it back, or we can send it back. But, you know, my thing was, you know, I wasn't going to vote for a budget that people lost their jobs. And so, Ms. Daniels had put out there, well, actually, Mr. Claffey put out 4%. And then Ms. Daniels went all the way up to 4.75% because that's what she was told, that's the line that no jobs would be lost. And then Mr. Johnson went 4.7, and that passed. The 0.05 or 0.5% made the difference for everybody to pass it. I think some people were hungry because that was a long night. But at that 4.7, and that's what we're proposing here, and then the mayor has the 4%. I guess my pointed question is, what is the expected reduction of positions with the 4.7 or the mayor's 4%? So what are those exact numbers?
Yeah.
I'm just making sure we understand the question.
So from an overall reduction standpoint, I think as we mentioned, there were 5 teachers that did receive RIF letters. We have about 35 folks that are retiring this year. And then in addition, some of those positions, we were able to go ahead, and the folks that we thought in that 4.75 we would have to eliminate, we were able to transition into some of those open positions. So I think, as Dr. Andrade and I would state, is, you know, if it truly is a 4% overall budget, I don't think you're going to see more from a teaching standpoint of a reduction of more than 5 individuals.
Okay,
I
so
think
5 at the 4.7 or the 4? The 4.
I think it's going to be both.
Okay, so
Yep.
just the 5 positions, and you think you can move those around to other?
And those are teachers.
Teachers.
Right.
Right. So, and then there's a reallocation on para-educators. There's the openings, and we have district-wide openings, that, again, there's a position for every, other than those 5 positions, there's a position for every other body if they're willing to make a transfer.
So teacher-wise, that's the number. All the other staff and all the other schools, they're fine, it's, okay. Okay. Yeah.
Couple things, just want to clarify for the record. Paras, if they're certified, can actually fill in as a substitute in a class and teach it and get paid as a teacher, correct?
There's contract language around that, so there's a differential if they cover a classroom.
And the other thing is, teachers have to be certified by level, like I think it's K through 6, maybe?
There's a number of
And then
different.
Then, like, you can't take an elementary teacher and just put them teaching in high school because they're not certified.
if I may. There's a number of different certifications.
Right.
It's not that simple. So a high school social studies teacher can't teach a elementary teacher or teach a science class.
No, I just want to let people know that this, you just can't shift as much as you'd want to. They have to be certified to fill a position you're trying to shift them to. Any other questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thanks. And I am gonna rewatch this because I just wanna get this straight. Because just to be completely transparent, I really struggle with what you just said about, because you start moving the heads around and that's where I lose you. So to Alderman Tebow's point, 4.7, you're still gonna, the difference between 4.7 and 4.0%, while it is an increase in monies, regardless, what I heard is you're still gonna RIF 5 teachers. And then 30 positions will be lost by attrition, and you won't backfill those.
Not those exact positions, but again, I would get into, if we had the
This is where I'm gonna lose you.
So,
Drop some breadcrumbs for me.
can I?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 4.7, so we had a question from the Board of Education to say, even though we went ahead and proposed a 3.5, what would we get to, or, what would we, so nobody lost their position, what would we have to ask for? And what we came to the Board of Education and said was, in order to get to 4.75%, which was roughly a $1.5 million increase from the 3.5 where we were to the 4.75. There was a slide that we shared that showed 47.75 positions. I think the confusing part is we already had to go ahead and RIF teachers based off of contract language. With the reduction from the mayor at the 4%, and looking at the hypotheticals if we got 4.7, we went ahead and said, as a district, could we make either one of those buckets work? And what is that FTEs that we would have to go ahead and RIF? Because there are 35 retirements. If you go ahead and take those 5 positions, you're fairly close to that 40 number, and then there's a reduction in our overall paras. So the 47.75 that we shared to the Board of Education was not just teachers. We were very clear about that. It was a mix of overall personnel, administration staff, secretaries, paras, teachers, custodians. It was everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
All set, Alderman Sullivan? Alderman Lopez, you haven't had an opportunity.
Okay, so 2 silly questions. Can the Board of Education make you not fire people? With that, if they say, do not reduce, do not send those people home, can they collectively agree to do that?
They can direct me. I would,
Fight back.
what's that?
Fight back?
I mean, I would give them the data to say, we're gonna hire, just because, I hate to keep on picking on the Latin teacher. But-
Or the Italian teacher?
Right,
I noticed the
right, I
mayor used
just-
the same example.
right.
That person's screwed.
Right, I mean, just, again, we would have, if they directed me to say, do not lay off this person, I would hire a teacher back that would have a certification that the person could not move, and they would have 5 students in front of them for the day at a salary of $80,000 a year. I mean, that's what you're asking,
I
right?
take it as a given that you would not like it because you presented on 4.7, and you make the case that you are looking at district-wide numbers, and that this is what you believe is the best use of those things. So I understand that that is a position, and I also really hope there isn't a Latin or Italian teacher that's like actually under the gun for all of this. But I just wanted to know, in the infinite sense, does the Board of Education have the power to direct you to do specific things like that?
They could direct me, and we would have that conversation. At the end of the day, it's a recommendation back to the board. I mean, the appointments come through me, right? And then they would approve my recommendation.
And so then my second question is, I guess to the chair. If we did a contingency fund and said, okay, the school district and the mayor are confident with 4%, and the Board of Education has asked us for 4.7%, can we do a contingency fund saying you could use the 0.7, but specifically for when you hire, or if you hire, or if you finish your contract negotiations? Is
No.
that something within the Board of Aldermen's power?
No,
Okay.
not that direct. You could put contingency money aside that if at some point the Board of Aldermen decided that through inquiry from the Board of Education that they needed additional funds for some reason, it could be allocated. But the Board of Education sets the policy for education. The superintendent runs the school district. When you start getting into hiring and firing individual people, now you get into a real issue. You also bring the unions in, and you'd have a conflict. So Board of Education can't say, fire this teacher, unless there's a disciplinary issue that goes through a whole other process. So, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I just want to, again, I think I want to be careful with hypotheticals, right? On like, do we need this position over and we can go back to transportation. I think Mr. Gray mentioned it several times. Our biggest unknown factor is our contracted services and our district tuition. And so if we needed any type of contingency, again, where Mr. Gray said, you know, we're about $3 million over our projection from last year. So those are the things that, again, where even tonight, earlier, we talked about our projected, end of year, our end of year surplus for the LAC. It's only $100,000. That's a very tight budget, right? It is. Like projected, right? And so that's where that contracted services, out-of-district tuition, that's where if we needed any type of wiggle room in that reduction or looking at positions or where we need to put money into next year's budget, that's where I would be advocating to look at those line items over a couple other aspects, because again, those are in bucket one that we're going to be obligated to do. And so, I don't want to go to the Board of Aldermen in January and say, listen, we might be running a deficit because of these unintended aspects. So I want to be really careful. And again, Mr. Gray said it a number of times. Those are our two scariest lines. Transportation, we know the cost now. We don't know our line item for McKinney-Vento, which is our homeless population that we're transporting students around the state. A year ago, we budgeted $100,000. That was $500,000.
I don't think it's getting smaller.
And right, so those are areas that are true threats to our budget that, again, where we can talk about different positions and what do we want to do, but again, whether take transportation aside, contracted services, district tuitions, transportations, McKinney-Vento, contracted services is our biggest threat in the budget.
Can I follow up, please?
Crystal wants to say something first.
Sorry, if I can
No.
just add a couple additional pieces to what Dr. Andrade said. So I think I heard some folks say, wow, that's a tight budget, the forecast that I'm currently doing. There is roughly, what I'm estimating right now, about $3 million that's coming back to the city because of the benefits money. So my understanding, and I know this is year one for me, so I apologize, but my understanding is any benefit money that is left over at the end of the fiscal year does go ahead and get basically returned to the city of Nashua. So that is why it's sitting right now about 160,000 is what I'm estimating we'll have left at the end of this fiscal year. I think the challenge with when we hire some of these contract service folks, right, because we can't fill the positions that are open, we as a district can only move the money out of wages. We don't get to move, if somebody costs us roughly $100,000 wages and benefits, we don't get to move the 100,000, we only get to move the wages. And I'm not trying to open up a can of worms, I'm just saying, like, we're very grateful that the city of Nashua does cover the benefits piece, right? Because I think this would be a different budget conversation if that wasn't the case. So the budget is tight. We have a lot of unknowns related to contract services, special education, and out-of-district tuition. But I think to Dr. Andre's point, like, if the Board of Aldermen is gonna approve a 4.7%, I go back to what the alderman over here had said, you know, as somebody having a parent that, as somebody that is a parent to a student that has IEP needs, I think math and reading interventionists are important, right? I think what we struggled with the budget is, how do you keep as many staff, I think that was pretty clear, how do you keep as many staff so that nobody is losing a position? And that gets tricky, right? Based off of those student needs, they're changing drastically from what they were 5-10 years ago.
Senate?
You wanted to follow?
Yeah, he did.
Follow-up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
thank you. So Superintendent Andre, you went exactly where I was trying to go with that. I think there's definitely some expressed opinion that there would be no support for a budget where a person gets laid off. And I think that's an important position for us to hold as the Board of Aldermen when budgets are being prepared and made. But at the same time, that's not necessarily a hill we should die on. The Board of Education did tell us they need 4.7%, and I think we should listen to them. I don't think we should attach the extra conditions of exactly how it's going to be done, because that's up to the Board of Education to do. I also think that last year, I asked a very similar question to Superintendent Andre. What would you ask for additional money for? And he said the study to examine the buildings and that, and we did make that happen. So I think it's important for the Board of Education to know that the Board of Aldermen will support the full needs of the students as they articulate those. I think often we are portrayed as offering unreasonable budgets or, drastic cuts, and that's part of the budgeting process. You can't just immediately be like, here's a blank check. But where the case is made and where the value is presented, then Nashua does stand behind its children.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you. Forgive me for the out-of-the-blue question. I got to put on my dad hat for a second, just because, we hear things. We talked about a lot of the unappreciated heroes in the classroom, paraprofessionals. How is the school district's staffing levels, how are those sitting in regard to school nurses?
I'm trying to count how many we have. So there's one at every building. High schools each have 2. And then we have budgeted for 2 floated nurses to make sure all the schools are covered. And then we have some LPNs that help at McCarthy. We're looking at the need at Pennachuck because they have an increased enrollment. So that's been, do we need more services at Pennachuck because they're larger? So we are looking at some of that staffing kind of ratio. But
The nurses are required by state or federal mandate, one of the two.
But I think that if I may, what's the ratio? So you have a full-time nurse at, say, Mount Pleasant and, right?
But each school has to have a nurse.
Yeah, so.
Yes.
Thank you. Not a bad presumption, but I do want to hone in on a word choice that you used there in regard to the floaters. You had said budgeted. Are those, in regard to all the positions, the budgeted floaters, the positions in each school, are those all currently filled?
There's a vacancy for the second floater nurse.
Okay. And this is again, why I referenced putting on my dad hat, as he's wont to do. My child wasn't watching where he was going and bumped his head or something. And I asked if he had the opportunity to go down and get an ice pack, and he said, no, the nurse has been out all week. And that didn't raise so much the concern of, oh my God, my kid hit his head, what's going to happen? Because he does that on an hourly basis. My concern was kids who need medications distributed to them throughout the school day. It's my understanding that teachers are not authorized to do that. So what happens if, say, the school nurse, the one school nurse, or we'll pick on Bicentennial because they get a bigger enrollment. For Bicentennial is out, say she gets COVID and she's out for a week. That seems like a lot of airspace to fill, if I could,
Yeah, if I may. So that's where the floater nurse is essentially a substitute nurse. So if someone is out at Bicentennial, that floater nurse would fill in for Bicentennial during that time.
All right.
So it's hard to find nurse substitutes. So if we have them on the payroll, again, we have about 22 nurses, don't hold me to the exact number, but we have in the low 20s for nurses. On any given day, there might be a teacher out to illness. And that's where instead of calling an agency or you're making the phone calls at 5 o'clock in the morning, that our head nurse, who is the New Hampshire Nurse of the Year, Gina Lopez, who's just been recognized for that. She'll work with HR to assign that floater nurse to the position, and then that's how we get the coverage. And then if we're not able to provide the coverage, Ms. Lopez will work again with HR and the other nurses to make sure that there is coverage for each building, so that students are getting their medication, there is proper coverage. So again, that's where the two positions are, just because we have just a large number of nurses, and then, if there is an illness, that we have some coverage without making sure there's a vacancy in a building.
Sounds like a tough nut to crack. You're
It's
really
a
hoping
hard
that,
one.
you're really hoping you never have more than 2 nurses out at any given time, and that no school's having field day that particular day.
Yep, and that's another constraint. If there is a field day and, a student's requiring nursing services, so then some nurses are on field trips, and then we have to backfill and,
The nurses have to go on the field trips too, I would assume, for any
Sometimes.
children that
Yeah.
require medication throughout the day. Yeah.
All set?
Yeah.
Alderman Devo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this budget's going to be under scrutiny just because, there was an article this week in the paper where at least one alderman said he wouldn't vote for it unless we cut it down. I also was quoted, I said that I thought the 4% was a pretty good compromise considering the mayor originally went with the 3% and then we had 4.7, so I thought the 4% was a fairly good compromise. And when you look at all the departments that were able to get to the 3% or under 3%, I think we've been pretty good with the schools over the years, especially the last few where you were showing that chart. Because I think most of us on the board do care about making sure the schools are, I'm always saying, I want our schools to be the very best. Obviously, we're Nashville. I want to be proud of what we're doing. That was just a comment, but my question is, how many FTEs, teacher FTEs, did we have budgeted for this past year, and how much are we budgeting for fiscal year 2026?
we don't have the exact numbers with us tonight, but I'll be more than happy to respond in the morning with
Yeah,
those
that'd be great
exact
if you
numbers.
could get that to us. Yeah, just outside your head, is it more than 50?
So we,
Difference, I guess?
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, Dr. Andre. I would say, based off of, I think we have roughly about 1,000 teachers budgeted for fiscal year '26. I think you'll see prior to the cuts that happened last year, there were, I think, about 35 additional positions compared to what we have this current.
Yeah, but if you get that to me, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
So any information you provide it to Donna Graham so she can give it to the full board? Alderman Kelly?
So we talk about this, as long as I've been on the board, we talk about the out-of-district costs every year. And I know they keep increasing, so I'm going to ask a large blue sky question, but I know there have been discussions around ways that maybe districts could cooperate to start to form I don't know, a place where everybody could go to reduce those costs. But have you guys had, I'm sure you do, I'm sure this is in your job title, but all we see as aldermen is that line going skyrocketing every year.
So if I may, I think there's kind of two parts to the question slash something I'd like to clarify. So out-of-district tuition is that $6 million number that we see going up year over year. I think actually 2 years ago, it was roughly 5.7 million. This past year, we did a budget of 6 million. Next year, I think you'll see my budget is, or our budget is roughly 6.3 million. McKinney-Vento and our population that is currently in between homes, transportation is extremely expensive for those folks. We this year have now gone ahead and worked with the other districts surrounding us to do what we're calling cost share. So if we have a student that goes to school in Nashua and is displaced or unfortunately becomes homeless and is living in Manchester, we now have an agreement with Manchester, Hollis, Brookline, some of the other schools around us to do a cost share. To get those students from a federal standpoint, we have to get those kiddos from wherever they're living to school. We have roughly brought in about 200,000 this year. I had said to the team, why haven't we done that year over year? So that is something we will continue to do as we move forward to try to offset some of that. It's gonna offset slightly, but it's not gonna be a huge $1 million offset related to transportation for our homeless population.
So just a follow-up, again, I know we talk about this every year. Is transportation the biggest part of that 6.3 million, or are there other, what do you think the biggest portion of that out of district is?
I honestly think that's a different line. So your 6.3 million is our students that are truly in out of district placement. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Andrade, if we cannot support that student here in the Nashua School District and they need to be placed at like a landmark school out of district, that is the cost that I'm referencing at a $6.3 million.
Follow-up? How many landmark schools are in the state?
So not enough, quite honestly. We've actually, almost to your question, I did have a conversation with the Department of Education because that's some of our where we're requiring more contracted services in the district because there's not actually enough seats or placements for students to go out of district. So there's only, I think, 15 schools that qualify as out-of-district placements in the state. And so that's a limited amount. So if we're not able to provide a seat for, or a different placement for Mario, who's requiring that as on an IEP, then we're bringing resources into the district to meet that student's needs that may not be budgeted, or we're having different conversations. So there's, number one, not enough seats. We did have a off-the-record conversation with the Department of Education on what would happen if we opened up our own out-of-district, right? So like in-house, because we have approximately 200 students in intensive needs classrooms. We've had a conversation at McCarthy. There's room there. And so when the school was built, what does that look like if McCarthy was a collaborative school, similar to like or a regional school, that we can charge other districts to send their students to McCarthy? We do that at Brentwood. That's some of the special revenue. So we have students as far as Portsmouth that attend Brentwood. So I think those are areas of shared resources across the region, and we have to look at that a little differently. So there's not enough seats out of district, and so that's putting some increases. It's also, for some schools, I don't want to say that it's not moral, but we're seeing those tuitions go up through the roof. where a tuition could be anywhere from $50,000 to a replacement to $400,000. So it's a wide range depending on what type of services that they're offering a student, so, and they keep on going up.
I was on the Board of Education, that was over 18 years ago. We had a student that went to Perkins School for the Blind. I think that was $1 million a year.
I did not cost that much.
Follow-up, so when you do the facility study that you're going to be doing, will you be looking at some of that potential?
We've had some informal conversations, but I think when we look at overall special education, something needs to give. And so we just have a large number of students who are requiring different services, so I think we need to have that conversation on what would it look like if we had the economy of scale and put more students in a building. I think that's, again, it will get into philosophical questions, like if a student is not in their neighborhood school or program school, what does that do to inclusion, right? So, and I think that gets a little tricky. So I don't want to say that's the way we're going to go, because I think that's a larger conversation, but that is an area that we may be able to provide better supports to students. It might be a cost reduction, but I think it's going to be a philosophical question on what does that look like.
Thank you for your answer. It comes up every year, and I know it's not a tough, or it's not an easy thing to crack here, but I just want to continually ask if we're kind of continuing to row in the same direction.
So the study was awarded to Harriman, which was a little bitter because they're extremely familiar with many of our schools because they designed them. And they designed a lot of these special needs things, so I'm sure, I know that they're aware of how to design and utilize the spaces for special needs. Any other questions? Alderman Tebow?
Yeah, just one last comment. I just want to thank the three of you guys for coming out today and taking our questions, because I know, this season right now, the budget season is, one of the toughest we've probably been in a while, at least since I've been here, definitely. Maybe even longer than that, as we go through some of the changes that are happening, whether it's statewide, federally, or even in the city, trying to get our budget down and knowing that we still want to provide the same amount of high-level need that we have for our children in this city. I still have a student that's going to school, so I care too, and I'll care even after my student's gone, although I won't pick on Bicentennial, since that's the ward I live in. But I want to thank the Board of Ed, a lot of them that came out today, and our union president. I know some of them will probably be speaking during our public comment, but I just wanted to thank them for coming out and trying to get this so that, because we're going to have a lot of questions from the public on budgeting this year, and a lot of people are saying have a zero-level budget, which you just cannot have with inflation and the costs of everything that keeps going up. So I appreciate you guys coming out and answering the tough questions. Thank you.
I got a couple other questions myself, but I've been dealing with budgets in the city for 48 years, and I've never known a year that was an easy budget year. Some were harder than others, but there were never any that were easy. One question I have is, in your projection at the end of the year, are you taking into account the positions that haven't been filled and the monies you have from those salaries that were not filled?
Yes, so we do budget transfers out of wages for those positions that are unfilled that we are filling with contract services. So some of that wage money is moved into contract services to offset that cost. And that's where we're able to hopefully come in without saying we're gonna be in some type of structural deficit. We're able to move that wage money into contract services.
Okay, and I have one additional question. You have on line 81-200, buildings and improvements, a deficit number through March of 300,000. Can you explain that?
So that is based off of the revenue that we take in we do two, I believe the line you're talking about, we do two adjustments at the end of every fiscal year for the athletic fees that we collect, and we rent out our facilities. So if there's a dance competition and they want to rent out the auditorium at North and maybe the cafeteria, there is a certain dollar amount that is charged, whether they're a nonprofit or a profit. And that's why you see that reduction.
So that's a reduction in appropriations, sort of like a revenue.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Which just prompted another question, but I can't think of it. Ms. Bishop, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say something, and it goes off of Alderman Tebow's comments about how difficult this budget is. It is very difficult to make good decisions all the time that benefit every single person every day. And I think our administration really took the time and listened to what the city was requesting and put together a really solid budget plan for what we can do to be partners with the city. At the same time, I am thoroughly appreciative of all of the people who've reached out to me, who've reached out to our board, who are here tonight, the questions that you're asking to understand the budget so that you're not just making yes or no decisions. You're making decisions that are based on the most accurate information. And I want to reciprocate the comment. I want to reciprocate the compliment in being a part of our process and asking questions and really doing a deep dive into understanding what it is that we're asking for. Because we are responsible to the taxpayers. We are responsible for, how we look and how we're presenting things and what the optics are. And if we don't take the time to fully understand the budget where we can sit down at our own kitchen tables and explain what's going on, then we haven't done our due diligence. And I really appreciate those of you who have. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time and speaking with our team and asking questions and just being really fully engaged. So I appreciate all of the hard work that you guys have put in to understand the hard work that they've put in. And I'm just going to sit here and say yes or no.
So, a couple of other Alderman Wiltshire?
I'll wait for you.
Okay, a couple other comments, because I wear a few hats. One is, with the school projects we've had, there's been energy rebates in the amount of, it's between $70,000 and $100,000. They go back into the general fund. They don't go to pay the bonds, they don't go anywhere else, they just go into our revenue. And so, in essence, there's a savings to the city of $100,000 in energy rebates. The other thing is, I noticed your electric calculation was pretty level. Does that take into account that we are now generating electricity on the McCarthy School? Because we had to twist some arms to get that switch thrown. And May 5th, by the way, is the unofficial throwing of the switch. Because we've already thrown it because we were losing money. And the other thing I wanted to mention is the new Searles Security Vestibule Project, which is the last one funded under separate funding, is underway. And the school is extremely happy with us starting there. So if there are no other questions, yes.
Could I just respond, please? So based off of the utilities, the slide with the pie charts that we had shared, yes, you're right in saying there's not much of a utility increase for next fiscal year. I think we roughly budgeted about $22,000, which is not even 1%. With that being said, I think Mr. Smith does a very good job with plant operations and our utilities over the years to truly say, where are we going to be? In fairness, he came to us through the budget process and said he'd like an additional $100,000 or $150,000 to his overall utilities budget. And we cut that because we were trying to get as close to a 3% as possible. So the reductions that we have already done in this overall budget is where we were able to get to at a 3.5%. So we did a reduction in utilities. Again, we've moved some money from contract services as well as the out-of-district tuition. We've said we'll go ahead and take 4 buses off the road, which is a $320,000 reduction. I really feel we as the administration team have really shaved this budget as much as possible. And I think Alderman Tebow had said, this budget overall, if you look at our labor and our benefits, you're talking an 83% makeup. So it's really challenging to sit here and say, we can't cut any personnel if we're truly trying to be held to a specific number. Because, it's just a ripple effect. I mean, if we truly are going to get the 4.7%, I think most folks would probably know, is that going to offset something related to the tax rate, right?
Yeah, I asked those questions because I talked to Mr. Smith at least 2 or 3 times every single day. And we are saving money on all the schools we have solar on. And it's getting clearer and clearer every year because we have the history now, but saving quite a bit of money. I know the first year we saved about $15,000 at Fairgrounds Middle School, but even more now, because that was during construction. But yes, so Alderman Wiltshire.
Thank you. Thank you all for putting this budget together. This is probably the most difficult budget, the Education Department. It's the most difficult budget. And the things that you have to balance, I mean, the busing and the facilities and it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think you did a really good job explaining everything tonight, making sure that we were aware why you were doing what you were doing. And your COO, she's good. Yeah, I don't know where you found her, but I like her. You did, honestly. I mean, and she's been here, what, a year maybe?
Not quite, but
Not-
almost, yep.
You would think she'd been here a lot longer, so thank you for your hard work. Everything was very thoughtful. Everything you put together, I thought was really, really well done. And it is. It's the most difficult of all budgets in here, I think. And not because we don't have line item control, but because it's the biggest one and the most complex. You're talking about lives, teachers, kids, paras, all of it, your maintenance team, everybody. So I give you guys kudos, the Board of Ed, for doing such a good job putting this together. All of you, appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to the facility study. That's going to be interesting, maybe eye-opening. We'll see. All right, thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to allow them to step down. Thank you. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make the motion to table R25-143, which is fiscal year 26 budget.
The motion on the table is to table R25-143 till the next budget meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public comment?
Oh, it's not.
What? Yeah. No, it's the second one.
Good evening. My name is Paula Johns, and I live at 15 Westbourne Drive. I'd like to say thank you for the chair, because I broke my patella, and it's hard to sit on those benches, like really hard. I hope we're going to get more than 3 minutes here. This is a lot to digest, and I kind of started digesting it last night.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, great, That's really great, because you were servants of the people, except we serve you. First of all, rules can be broken all the time, which it is here. First of all, I'd like to say to Alderman Lopez that I'm really, well, I'm not shocked. I'm really annoyed, I guess, is that the Board of Ed wants 4.7% increase, so that's what we have to give them, 4.7. I'm sorry, on February 26th, I think that's what the date was. I couldn't make the meeting because I already was like 3 weeks into a broken kneecap and I couldn't walk. And I came, and I have been working with one of your aldermen, and I was talking about what we needed to do for our seniors, for income, because we didn't have married. And I was fighting then to see if we can get about $75,000 exempt, so us seniors could have an exemption on married income. But the board came back with $67,000, $10,000 more than what the mayor wanted for single. I think that was a slap in the face, because you're asking us now, us seniors, many of us who don't have any kids in school, been paying on our homes for 41 years in taxes, to come up with a 4.7% increase when the mayor said 3%. You have a budget you have to live in just like the rest of us do. You can't be considerate of us seniors but we have to be considerate always of the Board of Education. I've sat on both boards, and I've seen all these budgets go through. And since I only have 3 minutes, it doesn't give me a lot of time, but our population now is down to 9,701 kids. Back in 2008, 2009, we were up over 12,000. We were 12,370 students. After COVID, we saw our student population drop. Yes, we have to be able to educate our students in class.
1
but
minute.
the cost of all of this, it keeps going up and we keep losing. Why are we losing students? Anybody asking? Because maybe our proficiency is down? And what is really an adequate education, Ms. Raymond, who sits in the State House? You and I both sat there, both sides of the aisle. What is an adequate education? So what are we teaching? We don't even know what an adequate education is. So as we keep seeing these numbers going up and up, what consideration
30
are we
seconds.
having on the taxpayers of the city? How are we going to go through this budget? And all of you know that you only have bottom line control of this budget, and you've all been on this board long enough to ask, can we move the money around? No, you can't. You can give it to the district and say, here's an extra $10,000. You've got to figure out what you want to do. But this budget, 4.7%, is a slap in the face to the taxpayer of the city when every other department has to live within their means.
Time.
And I'm hoping come November, we're going to see new people in this chamber.
Hi, I'll wait for Alderman O.
Name and address.
I was just going to wait for the timer to hit. Gary Hoffman. Gary Hoffman, 38 Perham Street, Nashua, New Hampshire. Thank you for taking some time tonight. I just want to give some context as to why the school budget, does not decrease necessarily, even though we have fewer students than we once did. And I think Ms. DeGray pointed this out. We have about 400 more special education students than we did 10 years ago. Realize that catastrophic aid does not kick in till about $75,000. It's 3.5 times the state average. And so we're on the hook up until that. So, average per pupil costs in Nashua is about $4,000 less than the state average, around $18,500. Don't quote me on that. But special education students on average cost about $38,000 more in addition to that. So that really kind of explains some of the reasons why you see the numbers that you have. We have been reducing teachers over the years, but as Dr. Andrade pointed out, we've had to redeploy them into new positions. I asked for these numbers, and a few years ago we had about 870 kind of traditional teacher FTEs. We're down to about 801. I'm curious what they will be after this budget. I know they're fewer than the 801, but where we've redeployed them, ELL teachers, other sorts of support services. So we have been doing that. As for, why are there fewer total students? From the reports I've seen, it's actually just mostly due, people are having fewer kids. And that's not a Nashua issue, that's a New England issue, it's a national issue. It's just, people are having fewer kids in this country, and that really accounts for almost the entirety of the declined school age population. New Hampshire is one of the oldest states in the union, if not the oldest. We're like in the top 3. So I don't think we should be surprised that the number of total students have gone down. And we also need to realize why the costs increase. Well, it's mostly due to the increase in special education students, the ELO costs, that really more than accounts for the reduction in total students. So thank you for your time, Alderman Dowd and President Wilshire and Clerk Mike O'Brien, one of my favorite people. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'll try and keep it less.
Set the
Yeah.
clock.
Oh, I have to wait.
Move. Okay.
All right, thank you. Hi, I'm Heather Raymond. I'm on the Board of Education. I'm also the state rep for Ward 1, as was pointed out earlier. I just wanted to reiterate a couple of Mr. Hoffman's points This is not a unique situation to Nashua. Every single school district in the state is experiencing catastrophic rises in the cost of special education services, increases in the percentage of students who are now identified and receiving services, and huge increases in transportation costs. I think that we're seeing kids come in with more needs, but I think that generally society is doing a better job of identifying these students and giving them the supports and services that they need. Dr. Andre talked about beefing up our Tier 1 instruction, and I think that that's something that Nashua has shifted its focus to in the last year. Some of it has been very controversial, and I think that we're going to see a difference in test scores over time as we continue to really focus on this. I also wanted to just address a couple of the questions that happened earlier about transportation and can we charge kids for transportation? The answer is not most of them. State law RSA 189.6, transportation of pupils, requires the districts in the state to provide transportation at no cost to all pupils grade 1 through grade 8 who live more than 2 miles from the school to which they are assigned. This also includes charter and private school students who live in Nashua and attend a charter or private school within Nashua. So we are required by law to cover all of those costs, period. We do have an agreement with BG where those students pay the same fee that our high school students pay, and they come, they've arranged their bell times, so they work with us so that they take a bus to one of our high schools and then over to BG. And I think that works out. Thank you. And then the last thing I just want to point out is vouchers do impact your tax dollars. We have about 50 students who get vouchers. That's $205,000 from the state that we're no longer getting, but the state is paying out $260,000 for those kids. And we pay all of the transportation costs K through 8 and all of the special ed costs K through 8. So the property taxpayers in the state are picking up that difference, and it's really an increase of at least $100,000. So when we look at the budgets, vouchers aren't free, they're extra money. And we still have the same responsibilities to those students for special ed and transportation. So that's all. If anybody has any questions, email me. I'm happy to answer them. Thanks.
Any other public comment? If none, okay. General discussion, Alderman Senate.
Thank you. I had a procedural question, and this is, you can all just attribute this to me being the new guy. We have, at least in this segment of the budget, we really have two budgets before us. We have a department proposed and a mayor proposed. As I'm thinking ahead to our wrap-up sessions and when we're ultimately going to be voting on a bottom line budget here, when we get to that point, is there some sort of move or motion that we need to make to indicate when we vote on the budget whether we're accepting the department proposal or the mayor's proposal?
The only budget that we're acting on is the one given to us by the mayor. To change that budget, if you reduce it, it's 8 votes. If you increase it or change it, it's 10 votes. So
So before us right now is the 4%.
We're only acting on the budget the mayor gave to us. If you want to add something to that budget, you need to make a motion, and it would need to get 10 votes.
All right. So we spent the night discussing 4.7, but we're really looking at 4 flat.
We're looking at the mayor's budget, yes, 4%.
Okay, thank you.
The rest of it was educational. If you wanted to, if you think anything beyond that is that you want to add to the budget, you would have to make a motion and have to pass budget, would have to pass the full board by 10 votes. Alderman Tebow?
I have a question on that. So, since we don't do line items on the education budget, would we just say we want to give a certain amount back to education, and then they're just getting that lump sum and they can put it in their line
So
items?
you've got 2 options. You either accept the budget that the mayor gave us from a dollar amount, or you make a bottom line change up or down to that amount for the school budget. That's it.
Okay.
You can talk to or suggest to the board what you feel is needed or in excess, but it's their decision.
Okay.
Anyone else? Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, if we took the difference in what the mayor presented and what the Board of Education actually asked for from a different budget department, and it's still equal the same amount, would we need 10 votes or would we need the same?
No, you'd be making a massive change to the mayor's budget. You'd need 10 votes, and that's $900,000. Which division do you think you want to take 900,000?
So you're saying that if the line of the budget is the same, we still would need 10 votes?
Yes,
Okay.
because you're changing who's getting what. You could say reduce from one division a certain amount of money, and it would only need 8 votes, because the total budget is under. But if you make major changes to the budget, I'm sure legal's gonna say you'd need 10 votes.
I've heard guidance in the past that if we took from one and put it in another and it equaled the same amount, we just passed the budget.
We can get that clarification from legal.
Okay.
Any other comments? Seeing none, remarks by Alderman. We've gone through that. All right, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
No,
Motion on the,
we already tabled budget back on the table.
Oh,
did.
we already did.
We
no, we
did.
already took it up.
Oh, we
Dave.
did.
Before we did public.
You voted no.
Oh.
The motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 10:01.